This is Atomic Shinobi and today I'm going to narrate second and final part of what if Fem-Naruto accidentally traveled back in time into parallel universe. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
Blood was all over the place. The sand turned into a sticky, muddy mess as shinobi from all over the elemental nations lay dead on the ground, their life fluids dripping away. Natsumi was approached by a shadowy figure. She attempted to move, but her legs were as heavy as lead and her feet were immobile. She reached for a kunai in desperation, but her pouch and all the other places she usually concealed weapons were already empty. The adversary approached, his crimson eyes shining. He had a sly smile on his face. Uzumaki. With her eyes wide and her kunai ready, Natsumi sat bolt upright in her bed. Kurama complained, "Steady kid, it was just a dream." After taking a shaky breath to regain her composure, Natsumi once more concealed her kunai under her pillow. She wiped the small amount of perspiration from her brow and answered, "A very vivid dream." She sighed and got out of her tossed sheets. From the depths of her thoughts, Kurama observed his host preparing for the day. Weak creatures as they are, the human was disintegrating. He supposes he couldn't hold it against her because she was human. When she wasn't acting like a dim-witted fool, she was a strong one. "You need to get more sleep, Naruto. It's Natsumi now." With his lip twisted into a snarl, the most feared tailed beast gazed upon his host and said, "I will call you Naruto until your inner self reflects your outer appearance." Eventually, Natsumi muttered, "I get enough sleep." Natsumi still looked like her 17-year-old self in her mindscape. Every day, she paced along her sewer. Like mental landscape. Worrying about the future all the time. She was constantly reflecting on what she had lost. To be honest, it was getting a little annoying that Kurama had to watch her go through the memories of how each of her loved ones had passed away. "Shut up, brat, you know you're lying. You hairless monkeys can't function properly without your daily nap." Natsumi continued to pace endlessly and responded, "I don't have time to take a nap." She didn't even turn to look at the fox. "Besides, I have to meet the Hokage in an hour or so anyway. Stop worrying." Kurama slammed his numerous tails to the ground and sighed in frustration. "If you keep wallowing in this pit you have dug yourself. The people here are going to die as well. How I handle things is none of your business." Kurama let out a furious roar. "I sacrificed half of my very essence for you, you ungrateful brat. I have every right to tell you that you are being a fool." At last, Natsumi halted her incessant pacing and turned to face Kurama, her rage visible. Trying to control her voice, she spoke slowly, "I am trying my best." Kurama roared back, "You are lying to yourself and you know it. The level you are currently performing at is on par with what you wear as a fresh genin." "I have worked my ass off since then," Natsumi yelled, "that is going too far." Kurama decided to sleep through his host's annoying pacing and memories because he had run out of patience. He positioned himself comfortably on the wet floor, his back to her. The huge fox closed his eyes and refused to hear anything more. The blonde girl yelled at him, "Yes, you have. But recently you have thrown all that work down the gutter, wallowing in self-pity. Your people are dead, Naruto. Deal with it before the people here follow the same path." The elderly man was gazing at the Hokage mountain when Natsumi arrived at the Hokage's office a few minutes early. She bowed slightly in greeting, "Sandame, Sama." He returned the greeting, "Natsumi Chan," while continuing to gaze out the window. "Are you ready for today?" "I suppose. Are you?" The old man inhaled deeply before he said, "For the meeting? Yes. For what follows? I do not believe so. I am old, Natsumi Chan. Even getting through the paperwork is becoming a difficult task for me. The news you have brought has aged me. I could help you with the paperwork. That is kind, my child, but after this meeting you will be just as busy as I. I will leave a shadow clone." Sarutobi turned away from the window and sighed. "You know they do not last long enough, and you need your full strength for what is to come." "I can hardly use my full power now anyway." Natsumi laughed, "I can't use the Rasengan. I can't summon the toads or use Senjutsu. I have had to try change my whole fighting style but it has not been working very well at all. Even Kakashi said that I am a pathetic excuse for a jonin." As he lit his pipe, the Sandame observed the Uzumaki and said, "Yes, I watched your training session yesterday. You can still use the Kyuubi." Ignoring the annoyed groan in her mind, Natsumi began to pace and waved the idea away. "Isn't that a bit much for everyday sparring?" Before responding, the Hokage blew out a cloud of smoke. "That may be so, but as you said, it is needed. Kakashi needs to know exactly what you are capable of. Have you tried to summon the toads yet?" For a moment, Natsumi paused her pacing to give the man a perplexed look. No Hokage. Sama, I have not. Natsumi was not entirely sure what the Sandaime was attempting to accomplish. I remember when Jiraiya first tried to summon, he said, turning back to the village. He had not signed a contract yet, you see, so it was incredibly stupid of him, he said, laughing at the memory. Natsumi had never heard a story like this before. She had never given much consideration to how or when Jiraiya obtained the contract. Shinobi did not simply share summoning contracts, and since he was a civilian child, he had not inherited it from his family. When she finally asked, what happened? Recalling the white-haired brat vanishing in a cloud of white smoke, the Hokage laughed once more. He was reverse summoned to Mount Myoboku. There was silence in the room. Are you saying that I should try summoning? The elderly man explained in a gentle tone, as if addressing a crying child who had dropped their ice cream. I am saying, my child, that it might not be as hopeless as you think it is. As he went on, his tone became slightly more solemn. Why aren't you using the Rasengan? Natsumi gazed at the man as if he were insane. Was this really such a dumb question for him to ask her? What do you mean why? She yelled with rage, people will ask how I know it. Uzumaki Natsumi has no right to know the fourth signature jutsu. In her heart, Natsumi was devastated. One of the few things that bonded her to her father was the Rasengan. She had put a lot of effort into learning it and even more into finishing it. Something that even her father couldn't do. She was aware that he had been pleased with her. Being unable to use it was something she detested. Why not? Hiruzen asked, giving her the impression that he was trying to make a point, but she was genuinely clueless about the man's thoughts. You trained with Jiraiya after all, and Minato left all of his techniques to be shared with his family or any other shinobi deemed worthy by the current Hokage. But, the man's voice changed from gentle to firm and unyielding as he said, use every technique in your arsenal, Natsumi. You know you are going to need it in the future. Natsumi said nothing, then answered, people will talk. Let them. You have had people talk about you your whole life, have you not? Of course it was true. And following today's meeting, people were sure to talk. Even though, Natsumi, was not Minato's blood relative, would it really be acceptable to use the Rasengan? She didn't think it was, for some reason. She no longer possessed the Rasengan. It was Naruto's technique to master. I do not think it is a smart plan. The pipe nearly broke in the Hokage's hands. The Uzumaki's profound depression was impairing her capacity for rational thought. It is better than you getting yourself or Kakashi killed because you are disabling yourself. He chided her. You are strong, Natsumi. Stop being so scared of being noticed here. You came back to help us, not to become a wallflower. Stand out like you always have. Konoha needs your strength now more than ever. After this meeting I order you to attend grief counseling. You have been unable to deal with your grief alone. No one here could possibly understand what it is like to lose everything. Natsumi cried as she screamed at the man. What on earth could he know what she was going through? Despite being the Hokage, she was unable to keep her people safe. Hiruzen shouted back, Uchiha Sasuke lost his whole family. Although he never scolded his subordinates, he could not possibly let Natsumi turn into another Tsunade. After taking a deep breath, the elderly leader said, Kakashi lost his family and his team, the only people he has ever cared for. Inoichi lived through exactly what you have been through. I will arrange for you to meet him whenever you are in the village. With tears running down her cheeks, Natsumi turned away from the elderly man. He has seen enough of my world. I don't want to bother him with any more of my troubles. The Sandaime softened his voice and said, this is an order, Uzumaki. Besides, I think he needs to talk to someone about it as well. Shikaku does too. Recalling the sickened, looking Inoichi who had come home that day to embrace his wife and daughter, Natsumi bowed her head in resignation and wiped the tears from her eyes. Kurama was pushed to the brink by the Hokage's agreement with her. At the moment, she was not doing her people any favors by making sacrifices. Her voice was soft as she replied, Hi, Hokage. Sama. Good. Now remember the plan. The council awaits us. The council members were already seated and muttering to each other in silence when the Hokage pair entered the meeting room. As the Hokage entered, they fell silent and stood, bowing respectfully before taking their seats once more. Natsumi caught the attention of curious onlookers, but nobody mentioned it. We'd talk about it soon enough. Natsumi stood on his right side, and Sarutobi sat at the far end of the table. As the meeting began, Sarutobi said, Good morning, council members. I have asked you to gather here today in full for a number of reasons. Each and every one of these are linked to a single secret that I have kept from the village for the past 10 years. There was silence in the council room. When a secret was mentioned, Danzu's eyes grew piercing. His eyes briefly strayed to Natsumi before returning to his longtime friend. With his elbows resting on the table and his fingers lacing, Sarutobi went on, as we all know, 10 years ago the village was attacked by the Kyuubi. The Hokage disregarded the bristling in the room and said, that night, the Yondaime sealed the beast into a newborn boy, thereby creating a Jinchuriki, sacrificing his life in the process. Today, I have come to inform you that this is a lie. The council was stunned. A number of members attempted to interrupt the Hokage, but he prohibited interruption by raising his hand in a stop signal. Danzo narrowed his visible eye even more. Yondaime Sama did not create one Jinchuriki, as he deemed the power too vast to be helped by one single person. Instead he split the beast's chakra in half and sealed both halves into two separate individuals, hereby creating two Jinchuriki. After that, chaos ensued. What? A number of voices spoke simultaneously. What do you mean two? Who was the other individual? Why was this kept from us? Hiruzen, is this person in the village? There is another demon. Kill them both. The civilian representative's eyes were burning with rage as he made his final statement. That was the final thing that was said. An extremely powerful intent to kill quickly filled the room. As they looked around the room for the potential threat, the shinobi members grew tense. Shikaku sighed and palmed his face, while Inoichi gave the civilian a disgusted look before glaring at Natsumi. The civilian stared at Natsumi, his eyes wide with terror, and he was trembling. The Uzumaki's hands were balled into fists, her head was lowered, and her eyes were concealed behind her bangs. Before focusing on the Natsumi, the Hokage said to the civilian, who was now doing his best to keep his bladder under control, Isoo-san, speak of them like that again and I shall see to it that you never sell a single thing in this village again, after a visit to Ibiki-san and Enko-san, of course. Natsumi-san, stand down. The air's oppressive force dissipated. The redhead relaxed her hands and inhaled deeply. She bowed slightly to the elderly man and then raised her chin to reveal her entire face to the council, her blue eyes piercing and cold. Pardon me, Hokage. Sama. Once more, the Hokage faced the council. With their guard up at the display of power, the members of the Shinobi Council were now openly observing Natsumi with curiosity. Danzo was curiously glancing from Natsumi to the Hokage. The old war hawk asked, is this woman the other Jinchuriki, Hiruzen? Hiruzen nodded after making eye contact with his longtime friend. Yes, this is Uzumaki Natsumi. The old village leader replied. She is the sister of the late Uzumaki Kushina, our previous Jinchuriki, and thereby the aunt of Uzumaki Naruto, our other Jinchuriki. Forgive me, Hokage. Sama, Heishi said with a scowl. My late wife was good friends with Uzumaki Kushina. We were led to believe that her whole family perished with the fall of Uzushiogakure. The Sandame responded by confirming the nod. Yes, we believed that Kushina's family had been lost completely. Uzu was destroyed completely and it was quite difficult to identify all of the dead. A lot of people had even been reduced to ash. Natsumi was only 4 years old at the time of the fall and although her mother and father had died, she miraculously survived. She was found some ways outside Uzushiogakure and was placed in an orphanage where she stayed for 10 years. It was by chance that my student Jiraiya found her on his travels. As you can see, she looks a great deal like his sister, so Jiraiya brought her to Konoha on a hunch, where she reunited and moved in with Kushina. Kaharu impatiently questioned, and where has she been since then? Aburame Shibi abruptly interrupted the man he was sitting next to by saying, I would like to know as well. Why? Because I believe Konoha could have used the strength of another Jinchuriki and another Uzumaki. She left the day after being sealed in order to train to control the Kyuubi, Sarutobi clarified. Why was she not trained in the village as the boy is? Asked Danzo. I myself would have been able to train her personally to control her power and protect Konoha. She had not had any training as a shinobi when the sealing took place, therefore it would have been a great risk for her to train here while her chakra coils were still adjusting. There was the possibility that she would lose control and destroy the village, therefore I ordered Jiraiya to train her elsewhere. Shikaku said languidly, so the reason you did not inform us was to protect her. Actually, it wasn't a question. Yes. Sume looked at the Nara and said, what do you mean? The scarred man closed his eyes and rubbed his beard, sighing, troublesome. If he told anyone and the information got leaked, she and Jiraiya Sama would have been attacked often. As a main branch member of the Uzumaki clan and a Jinchuriki, other nations would have hunted her relentlessly. She would have been under even more stress and therefore it would have led to a greater possibility of her losing control. Ah. Okay. The untamed woman sat back with a frown on her face and said, so why was she chosen then? There were many newborn children available. She was chosen because she is an Uzumaki. I don't get it. Hyuga Heishi answered the question like he was reciting from a textbook. The Uzumaki clan were once very well known for their vitality and huge chakra reserves. This, in combination with the other properties of their chakra, allow them to be the ideal hosts for tailed beasts. An Uzumaki would have the greatest chance of controlling the beast's chakra without harming themselves. There were a lot more disputes and queries. Natsumi was growing irritated and impatient as the meeting went on. They talked as if she didn't exist. Kurama was also repeatedly referred to as the beast, or the demon, by them. Even though he appeared accustomed to it, Natsumi was getting annoyed. However, she remained silent and did not become angry. Before they entered the room, Sarutobi had spoken to her and told her to keep her composure and not to interrupt. Naturally, she made a mistake when the civilian referred to Naruto as a demon, but the Sandaime chose to overlook it. However, his subsequent glance at her suggested that further disruptions from her could lead to the collapse of the entire plan. So, despite the fact that it was becoming more difficult to maintain her composure by the minute, she managed to do so. Shikaku finally cut off another dumb question that would have probably led to another hour of discussion in the council. So, why was she gone so long? It should not have taken her 10 years to gain control. Ah. Sarutobi sighed, expressing his covert gratitude to the Nara for sparing them from yet another torturous hour. Yes, Natsumi completed her training a few years ago. She was given the rank of Jonin due to the absolute control she had gained over her beast. She was up until that point, not known at all throughout the elemental nations. Therefore, I had her gather useful information from everywhere. This is the reason that she has returned. She has found information stating that the person who orchestrated the Kyuubi attack 10 years ago has now formed a group exclusively out of S-ranked missing.nin. They are currently leading the world into the Fourth Great Ninja War. That is not the worst of it, however. They plan to gather every single one of the tailed beasts and use the combined power to create a weapon. This weapon will be strong enough to destroy a nation in a second. Danzo straightened his posture. Even though he detested Hiruzen's style of governance, he was aware that the man would not bring this up unless there was an actual danger. He questioned, who is the leader of this group? Wondering who could be strong enough to command a group of such powerful nuke.nin and make a tailed beast attack. In preparation for the next step, Sarutobi straightened his shoulders and said, the group's name is Akatsuki. The man who is leading them is Uchiha Madara. Each member of the council froze, their faces going white. Danzo appeared shaken as well. With a carefully masked voice, the Warhawk responded, Uchiha Madara died years ago. Even if he survived the Valley of End, there is no way he could still be alive. His temples were rubbed by the Sandaime. Madara did not die at the Valley of End. Somehow, he managed to survive. He also managed to gain some of the Shodem's cells. I am not quite sure how, but somehow, he managed to merge with these cells. This has allowed him to become, as I understand it, untouched by age. I do believe though, that he can still be killed. As everyone struggled to comprehend that Uchiha Madara was still alive and out for blood, there was silence. We are going to have to prepare. When will things start moving? Shikaku muttered a curse. The Akatsuki is still gaining power, so I believe they have 2 tailed beasts so far, but the last one was captured recently. They will have to wait at least 2 years before they can extract another demon. Shikaku straightened up and began writing down the things that needed to be done to get the village ready. At least we have some time, he said. I suggest that the academy gets moved into a wartime curriculum, Kaharu said. The next generation of shinobi will have to be strong and capable. I disagree, Shibi said once more. This is because the wartime curriculum shall only trouble the other nations. If they believe we are preparing for war, they might attack us. This will result in a weakening of both sides, no matter the outcome. This will result in the Akatsuki being able to gather the beasts more easily. Shikaku grinned. Occasionally, Shibi's prescience caught him off guard. I agree with Shibi-san, Hokage. Sama. We should rather just change the curriculum, making it look like we are simply upgrading our teaching methods instead of preparing for war. When Isoo, the civilian, asked, what about my daughter? She is having a hard enough time in the academy as it is. Heishi glared as he asked, do you want your child dead, Isoo-san? No, of course not. Heishi turned his white eyes to the Hokage and said, well then, don't complain. If your daughter can't handle the simple academy program that is currently in place, she won't survive being a kunoichi. Hokage. Sama. May I suggest that we completely restructure the kunoichi program? The current subjects being taught are rather disappointing. What do you mean, Haishi-san? Flower arrangement is not going to benefit the girls on the battlefield. I confess myself disappointed in how the academy has taught my daughter, and from what I have seen, the other girls are more interested in boys than they are in training. He explained with a sneer, tempted to look the campus of Inoichi. I suggest that selected strong Jonin kunoichi from different professions regularly teach the female students real skills that they will need, becoming some form of role models for the girls. In pleasant surprise, Hiruzen's eyebrows went up. You have good suggestions, Haishi-san. I believe it would be a good idea for the boys to also interact with some battlefield troops. Maybe I could issue these lessons as low-ranked missions. However, I doubt any Jonin would actually do them. The Hokage's voice waned as he considered issue. What if you get the shinobi on medical leave teach the brats? Sume asked. That way the little buggers will see being a shinobi is no fairy tale. It will also give the injured bastards a form of income. The room fell silent for a moment in contemplation. The Hokage grinned at the thought, saying, "That's a brilliant idea, Sume-san. Thank you. It was straightforward and would work. Also, I think that Naruto-kun should start training to control the Kyuubi as soon as possible. If they come after him, he will have to be ready." Seeing an opening, Danzo nodded and said, "I agree, I volunteered to help Naruto-kun personally." "Thank you, Danzo," Hiruzen said, grinning and tilting his head slightly before continuing, "but I think his aunt knows a lot more about being a Jinchuriki than anyone else in the village ever will, so I'll give Natsumi his Jinchuriki training. I'll also let Natsumi adopt Naruto-kun so that she can protect him because she is his last remaining family after all." Another potent weapon was about to slip through Danzu's fingers, but he was unable to press the sandame in this. The only person with real world experience in the field was Natsumi. Having him instruct her made sense, if she was in total command. "How sure are you that she has complete control?" The Hokage grinned. "Natsumi-san, would you please demonstrate your control?" "Hi, Hokage. Sama." Natsumi closed her eyes intently and clasped her hands in a ram seal. "Kurama. Yeah. Suddenly, a golden glow enveloped the red-headed Uzumaki, with 9 tails waving behind her. Her eyes, when she opened them, had also turned gold. To everyone's surprise, with the exception of Shikaku, Inoichi, and the Hokage, wooden furniture began to grow and sprout leaves all over the room. Even the 3 individuals who were aware of what would occur gazed in wonder at the expanding furniture. With wide-eyed shinobi examining the new growths, the whisper spread throughout the room, "Mokuton." Natsumi returned to her usual appearance and calmly explained, "No, this is not Mokuton. This is the Kyuubi's chakra when controlled. It is simply filled with a lot of life force." "There," the Sandame said, his sneer turning into a warm smile. "As you can see, Danzo, she has perfect control." Danzo had no choice but to concur. What if, however, under the stress of attack, she loses control? "I have partnered her with Hitaki Kakashi for future missions. He will be able to protect her and, if need be, subdue the Kyuubi with his Sharingan." Danzo had hoped that one of his Nei operatives would accompany her, but he assumed that the Hitaki brat's Sharingan would suffice. Shikaku leaned back and put his pen back in his pocket, turning away from his notepad. "There are a lot of preparations we will need to get started on now, Hokage. Sama. The most important, I think, is that we are going to need Tsunade Sama back in the village to train more med.nin. Sarutobi let out a sigh. "I would love for Tsunade to return, but I doubt anyone will be able to convince her to come willingly. I can't force her to teach anything. It won't be easy, but I think Uzumaki-san here might be able to convince her. They're distantly related, after all." Sarutobi turned his thoughtful gaze to Natsumi. Naturally, it was all for show. They had already talked about all of this. However, the council was unaware of that. He said to Natsumi, "Very well, it's worth a try. You and Kakahi-san will leave tomorrow at 0600. You may go make preparations for the mission." Dismissed. After bowing to the Hokage, Natsumi left the room with composure. She exhaled in relief as soon as the door was closed behind her. Even though the meeting went well, it took a very long time. A tiny smile appeared behind her scarf as she left. At last, she was able to adopt Naruto legally. Hee. Jiraiya laughed while making notes. Now he was crouched behind a bush, snooping around on some civilian girls who were playing in the mountain springs to cool off from the day's heat. The scene would be ideal for his book, which he was writing at the time. After the publication, his admirers would continue to laud him. A tale of a young, powerful shinobi and all the lovely women he encountered during his numerous journeys. This time, the protagonist might be a carefree, naive, civilian maiden who needs to be shielded from the perilous and dark world. The white-haired pervert laughed as he pictured a scene in a mountain stream, where the maiden and her close companions would escape the heat, but they would forget their bathing suits in the haste to reach the stream, and when the brunette girl abruptly began scanning the area to make sure they were alone before telling her friends that she didn't want tan lines, Jiraiya's focus faltered. The girl pulled off her bikini top, and the toad sage could barely believe his good fortune. Leaning closer, he found the ideal vantage point and made sure he was invisible. Before he disappeared in a silent puff of smoke, he felt a familiar tug on his being. As the chakra smoke cleared, the recognizable Mount Myoboku landscape emerged. Jiraiya blinked to regain his sense of direction. No, in utter desperation, he groaned, no, take me back." The man was actually crying as he pleaded with the little toad sage in front of him. As he examined the man before him, the toad lifted one of his bushy white eyebrows. "Jiraiya-chan, what's wrong?" Jiraiya made the best puppy dog eyes he could manage as he crawled forward until he reached the toad's webbed feet. "Fukasaku-sama, I was working on some crucial research at the time, I have to go back right away." Smack using his preferred bludgeon, the elderly toad struck the Sannin in the head. "Pay now, you moron. This holds greater significance than spying on women." Jiraiya's expression changed from one of childishness to one of seriousness as he rubbed the new lump on his head. Before he spoke to the elderly sage, he brushed the dirt from his clothes and straightened himself. "You respond, Fukasaku-sama. However, I am aware that you are eagerly awaiting the release of the next edition." For a moment, Fukasaku was thankful that no one could ever see him blush because of his green skin. The toad quickly shook his head to concentrate on the current problems. "Jiraiya-chan, we have some very important business to discuss, so I summarized everything for you here. It has to do with the child who was prophesied." "You mean what, Fukasaku-sama?" "Minato passed away." Toward the end, Jiraiya's voice grew softer. He considered Minato to be a son. The boy was such a sweet and intelligent youngster. As he developed into a strong and well-respected young man, he didn't change in that way at all. The newest cage to be named thus far. Too much thought of him was still too painful. It turns out the child was never Minato-chan. With a solemn expression, the sage turned around and hopped slowly toward his home. "Let's go inside, there is someone must meet." Following Fukasaku to his house in silence, Jiraiya got down on his hands and knees to get through the tiny door while he was silently lost in his grief. Fukasaku said, "Jiraiya-chan," as he entered the room. Even though he had visited Fukasaku's house numerous times, nothing had changed since his last visit. A young woman with red hair sitting at the far end of the room was the only unexpected sight. She resembled Kushina almost exactly. The thought of the fiery woman Minato was so smitten with made his heart tighten. "This is Naruto-chan." Upon entering the kitchen the following day, Naruto yawned and rubbed his hand through his golden spikes, exacerbating his severe case of bedhead. He looked at the letter left on the kitchen counter and wiped the faint drool from his chin. "Hey Squirt, I'm off on that mission I told you about last night. Just reminding you in case you forgot. I'll be gone for quite some time unfortunately. Probably a month or two. I might come home sooner but I doubt it. Also, as you know you are now officially adopted by me, so we are now family by paper as well as blood. That means you can live in the flat. I have already moved most of your stuff from your apartment. All that it left is some old furniture. If you want those two you should go talk to the old man, he will arrange for it to get moved. Okay, so since I will be gone for a while, which I really am super sorry about, I have composed a list type thing that I would like you to follow. They aren't rules, but suggestions that I strongly encourage you to follow if you want to be Hokage, which I know you do. First, keep training and remember to keep working on your chakra control. It's boring I know, but it will make learning awesome techniques so much easier. Second, go to classes. A Hokage needs to know all about the village laws and history, if not to listen to the boring classes, then at least to interact with your peers. They will be your future teammates after all. It's a good plan to be on their good side. Also, I have a hunch that classes are going to get a lot more exciting soon, although I can't say much about that. Third, I have arranged for the Ichirakus to make some meals for you. This will not be ramen. I know you hate veggies but not eating them is what is making you so short. It's true I promise. These meals will only be 3 times a week though. Please go. Think of it as a form of training. trains your body to be healthier, stronger and grow faster. The rest of the week you can eat ramen. Although it would make me happy if you could eat a fruit every now and again as well. I've left some in a scroll in the kitchen. It's one of those special ones that keeps everything fresh inside. Fourth, don't worry about me. If you think I'm taking too long, you can go ask the old man if there is any news. He will be able to tell you if I'm on my way home yet or still busy. Well, I suppose that's it. Once again, I'm really sorry for leaving you alone for so long. I promise to make it up to you when I get back. You can think of something you would like us to do together? Love you, Naruto. Don't get into too much trouble. Oh, that reminds me. I think it might be a good idea for you to keep pranking people. Don't just do normal pranks though. Think of it as infiltration training. Or training in setting traps. You must not be noticed at all when setting the trap, and you must not leave any evidence that could possibly link it back to you. That means you can't brag about it either. Have fun and see you soon. Love, Natsumi. The thought of eating vegetables made the blonde Jinchuriki groan. He had serious doubts that eating vegetables would actually make him taller. Like him, his aunt detested eating greens. A frown also appeared on his face as he went to class. However, it made Sensei Hokage ought to be aware of the village he was in charge of. However, he had a sly grin and a playful sparkle in his eyes by the time he finished the letter. He was eager to begin pulling practical jokes. He was shocked to learn that his aunt had genuinely urged him to do so. Parents should teach their children to follow the rules, right? Well, he didn't mind at all. He already had a few potential targets for an attack, no joke. He groaned half-heartedly and began preparing for the academy. He had initially intended to skip class in order to train, but it would have been wiser to go. He might even persuade Iruka Sensei to teach him a brand new chakra control technique. He would require strong chakra control to become a master, according to his new sealing book. It might not be as good as a medic's, but it would still need to be far above average. The 10-year-old was rushing to get to the academy 30 minutes later. After a brief pause at the door, he hurried back to the kitchen to pick up a few fruits for lunch. A few seconds later, he was sprinting down the street directly to the academy, a tiny smile tugging at his lips, his bright blue eyes blazing with mischief and determination. Girls fought loudly for seats next to their priceless Uchiha hair during the few minutes of waiting before class actually started. It was fairly clear that the bastard was gay, and Naruto rolled his eyes at their attempts. It was a huge waste of time for the girls. Shortly afterward, a somewhat agitated Iruka rushed through the door, holding stacks of papers and scrolls. After dumping the load onto his desk, he silenced the class. Putting a hand through his ponytail that appeared to be shaking, he said, "Okay kids, I have some pretty important announcements to make about the class plans from now on out." Naruto nearly ignored him. Class planning was never something he considered important, even though he had been trying to pay a little more attention in class. He didn't need to be aware of what they were doing beforehand. He would discover it when they were doing it. But as he read his sealing notes, he was listening with one ear because his aunt had hinted at a potential change. The whole academy curriculum has been changed by order of the council. From today on, wards everything will run in a very different way. Closing his book to listen more intently, the blonde raised an interested eyebrow. Many students in the class adopted the practice of sitting up straighter and paying slightly more attention. When things changed, it was rarely. As far as the students knew, there was no impending war, but the last time the academy curriculum was altered, it was to prepare for one. This specific class plans have never been done before, but I have the utmost confidence that you will be able to pull it off. It will not be easy. Classes will start at the usual time, but formal classroom lectures will finish at lunchtime. A few students were excitedly murmuring. Just half a school day? Is there anything better? But Shikamaru scowled and appeared to begin paying even more attention to what the teacher was saying. The class as a whole grew, saying, "After lunch, boys and girls will split up. After all, no half days." The idea of being parted from the Uchiha nearly brought some of the girls to tears. However, the boy with the dark hair appeared somewhat relieved. Naruto couldn't be certain, but it's possible that the tension in his shoulders had even slightly decreased. It was a miracle the bastard could walk at all without infuriating the huge stick up his ass, because he was so stiff and stuck up the entire time. Boys will focus on strength and fitness training, while girls will focus on infiltration, seduction and field first aid. This will not always be the focus of the two groups, but that will be discussed later. These specialized classes will continue until 1700. After this you will work in teams for 2 hours at least. What? We can't expect to continue training. Aren't machines unjust? I'd like to watch you train for so long. To restore order, Iruka pounded the board eraser on his desk. The class fell silent, with some of the civilian-born students appearing a little uncomfortable. This is what is expected of you. If you are not up to it, then you will be forced to drop out and become normal civilians. Iruka went on to say, these teams will be assigned every week. Each member of these teams will be responsible for training their teammates in a particular area. You will also be given these areas. Once every student is proficient in all of the assigned areas, they may alter over time. Within a week, you will receive a grade based on how well your teammates have progressed in your area. The Uchiha sneered, why should I receive a grade based on the ineptitude of everyone else? With patience, Iruka explained, teaching others is a sure way to improve oneself. The grading also motivates you to do your best and it teaches you to work as a team. This will not be an easy task, as I mentioned earlier. It will be necessary for all of you to contribute and cooperate with one another. Konoha has always been the strongest of the Big Five because of its teamwork. You all have a good chance of graduating early and is the best year ever to leave this academy if you put in the necessary effort. Have any inquiries? After learning that he could graduate early, Sasuke appeared somewhat more relaxed. If he could begin training seriously earlier, that would be better for his objectives. The Nara heir didn't appear to be about to nod off for once. Why is the council ordering this? Astonished to see the boy so intent on something, the spiky-haired hidden genius practically demanded. Iruka sighed and gave a small shake of his head after saying, I was not informed of the rationale behind the decisions. Along with the other academy instructors, I was merely summoned in this morning and presented with the updated plans. Will war break out? There was silence in the room as the first signs of panic and fear spread through the students, including the Uchiha, and Naruto's eyes widened. I am not sure why the changes are taking place, but we have been assured that there is no war brewing, Iruka said in a steady, calm voice. As everyone released the breath they had been holding, a collective sigh of relief filled the room. How are teams going to be chosen? A few seconds later, a boy from the civilian world asked. Every student will have at some point been on a team with every other student because of the way the teams are assigned. Following the completion of a full cycle, you will be tested in every subject that your peers have taught you. If you pass, each team will be paired with a Chunin or Jonin for the week, who will instruct you in their areas of expertise. Iruka. Sensei, where is Mizuki? Sensei? Sakura asked. Indeed, the white-haired man was nowhere to be seen, which was strange because he was always on time, Naruto thought as he scanned the room. Iruka scowled as if he was pondering how to respond to the query. Eventually, he responded, he no longer works at the academy. Why? The Chunin instructor appeared quite uncomfortable and abruptly changed the topic, saying, now if there are no further questions on the lesson plans, I would like to read out this week's teams. He is currently being questioned on his loyalty to the village. When the 10-year-old shinobi trainees arrived at class this morning, they were not prepared for the treason trial of Mizuki Sensei or the academy's transition to a wartime schedule. They all shared a look of uneasiness. Hyuga Hinata, Haruno Sakura, and Ibarain Shino will make up Team 1. Sakura will study village history and chakra theories, while Hinata will focus on chakra control. The class was still fairly large for an academy class, and it took some time to name the teams. You will concentrate on misdirection and stealth, Shino. Akimichi Choji will handle on field nutrition. Yamanaka Ino will handle infiltration, and Inazuka Kiba will handle tracking for Team 5. Uzumaki Naruto with trapping. Nara Shikamaru with strategy and mission planning, and Uchiha Sasuke with shuriken jutsu will make up Team 6. Following that, they were instructed to share desks with their temporary teammates. There was a lot of shuffle but little conversation because everyone was still too perplexed by the entire situation. Naruto and Shikamaru approached Sasuke because he showed no signs of getting up from his seat. Shikamaru, for once awake and alert, seemed to be trying to figure out why everything was changing, while Sasuke just brooded as usual, but with a slightly deeper frown. Naruto ended up between the Nara and the Uchiha, neither of whom appeared particularly happy about the situation. Naruto sighed as he glanced among his teammates. Well, this sucks, big hairy baboon balls. Even Sasuke jumped a little in surprise as Shikamaru laughed at the obscene language, his face returning to its typical slack expression. You can say that again. HN. The lectures that followed were the most difficult and demanding Naruto had ever encountered. There was no time for joking or daydreaming, and their Chunin instructor frequently repeated the fundamentals from a random student to ensure that they had been paying attention. It was a rare day when all of the students listened and took note as well. Naruto listened, he wasn't a big note taker, and Shikamaru had taken a slightly more interested expression, but he wasn't taking notes either. Iruka. Sensei was on edge, and everyone could see it. In a shinobi village, change was typically not a good thing. His teammates were the two dead lasts, and Sasuke sneered at them because they weren't even taking notes, and he wasn't impressed at the idea of actually having to teach them anything. The 10-year-olds were not accustomed to sitting motionless and paying attention for that long, so the morning went slowly. At least Iruka gave them 10-minute breaks every hour so they could stretch their legs and get some fresh air. The kids desperately needed some sunshine and fresh air, so when lunch finally arrived, they ran for the grounds outside. Since they left the village at 6 o'clock, Uzumaki had not said a word, but it was not an awkward silence, rather, it was a focused on the mission silence, the kind of silence that surrounds people who have nothing to share and are perfectly happy with it. Kakashi was happy, speeding through the trees with his new partner. His partner had a relaxed expression on her face, and she appeared to be quite happy too, occasionally closing her eyes to let the wind play with her hair. At any rate, that was how he felt. The day had begun rather slowly, and they had arrived at the gates at the appointed time. Kakashi was never late for a legitimate mission, exchanged courteous greetings, and then promptly devised a plan of action. Finding Senju Tsunade, Hime of the Sannin, and persuading her to return to the village was the first step in the mission. Finding the woman was obviously a difficult task because she was a brilliant and experienced kunoichi who did not want to be found. She would have taken precautions against Ninken tracking, so he could not use his pack, even though he had tried. Pakun had given Uzumaki a strange look and then told him to find the slug woman himself before leaving. Fortunately, the kunoichi had a slightly more helpful source of information. She called forth a toad and asked him to go ask Jiraiya if he had heard anything from Tsunade's whereabouts recently. The toad dutifully returned a short while later, stating that the princess had reportedly been spotted on the edge of the Land of Fire, a notoriously gang-ridden area of the country. Unfortunately, that tip was 3 weeks ago, and it would take roughly a week to get there. There was no way the woman was still there, but at least they had a lead, so they decided to set off after a brief discussion about the best course of action. Since Kakashi was the team leader in this case, he had the most influence over when they would take a break and how fast they would be moving. His partner had not yet objected to the pace he had been setting, despite the fact that it was a little too quick. She appeared totally comfortable, as though she could move more quickly without any issues, which was perfectly acceptable to him. The quicker they reached the next point, the better. With a normal team, they would have only covered 3/4 of the distance they had already traveled in the same amount of time and would likely have been quite exhausted. A few hours later, they had made good time, and Kakashi, who was running on fumes, indicated that they were to set up camp. There was only one tent. Only one person could sleep at a time anyway, as the other kept watch. Natsumi had set up the tent while Kakashi went out to find food. The warm sun was shining through the trees, turning the leaves golden. An hour or so later, Kakashi was roasting fish while Natsumi stretched and relaxed on the ground. He had mostly used signals to communicate, but since they had made it this far, he decided to give the kunoichi some leeway. He may have been a little harsh on her during their training session a few days prior, but at least she had the endurance to make up for it. Here, Kakashi handed Uzumaki her portion of the roasted fish. This was one of the few spoken words between them that day. She was used to having some sort of weapon that would deal a lot of damage after one hit, but she had never used it once. Maybe she had lost it after that mission she was on went awry. Her taijutsu didn't make sense in general, and the style seemed to be lacking something. She was a kunoichi, and everyone in their profession had secrets they would rather not share, but she seemed to take it a bit too far. She was close to no one, and no one had known who she was until she appeared in that crater. Her taijutsu was lacking something, and she seemed to be holding back, hiding things from everyone, especially him. Her face was always difficult to read, with a mask nearly always in place. The redhead smiled and took her fish. It was the first time he had ever seen her smile properly. Her scarf pooled around her neck, revealing her soft pink lips and whiskered cheeks. She had a very exotic appearance, and the smile seemed to make her look years younger, but it only lasted a fraction of a second. Her eyes flashed through a range of emotions, including surprise, grief, sadness, longing, and finally outrage and a deep, dark hatred. She masked her emotions quickly, though, as it happened so quickly that most jonin would have missed it. Her face formed into a smile again, even if it did not quite reach her eyes. She thanked him politely before she nibbled at her fish in silence while Kakashi stored the expressions he had just seen in his mental file of things about his partner. He wondered silently if she had recently lost a partner that he had reminded her of someone he had reminded her of him. Natsumi, who had just finished her fish and was nibbling on the stick, was now examining him very carefully. She sighed and threw away the wood fragment. She closed her eyes and rubbed her temples as she said, I have not been completely honest with you. HN. Her calculating blue eyes found him once more, and then she sighed and extended her hand, confusing the Jonin for a moment before chakra began to visually form, spinning faster and faster in her hand's palm to form a tight blue ball that appeared to be made of a hurricane of chakra. Rasengan. As Natsumi watched in the early morning hours, the light gradually changed from a pale blue to a joyful orange-pink. That morning was lovely. Some of the birds were freely spreading their wings in the cool morning air as they began to chirp cheerfully. As the Uzumaki slowly tipped her head from side to side, strengthening a grousing muscle, a genuinely serene scene unfolded before her. Her arms were extended above her head, fingers intertwined. Now the sky was rapidly getting brighter. The animals in the forest are getting more active, following the curved contours of the land's mountainous terrain. The forest itself stretched out in all directions indefinitely. Off in the distance, wisps of low-lying clouds bristled the tips of the taller trees. Additionally, there were a few typical clouds in the sky, drifting languidly by, slowly turning from orange to a paler white. Perched on one of the taller trees, Natsumi had a perfect view of everything. She let out a sigh as she lowered her arms to her sides and felt the coarse bark under her fingers. She tasted the air around her as she closed her eyes and inhaled deeply. This image would have delighted Shikamaru, as she considered her slack, spiky, pony-tailed, brilliant right hand man. A gentle smile adorned her bare features. When they did have some free time during the war, they frequently sat together. They would simply gaze up at the sky, losing themselves in the passing clouds. However, the scene was never quite as soothing as it ought to have been. Almost invariably, clouds of black smoke blended with the naive white, reminding them of the harsh realities of their existence. Everything was infused with war. Even the heavens. She was missing him. His sarcastic, easygoing humor and slack manner. He was a decent man. He would have been the most incredible FA. To get the thoughts out of her head, Natsumi slapped her cheeks and shook her head sharply. She shouldn't be considering these things right now. She had a purpose. With a resolutely blank mind, she watched the skies light up, merely taking in the scenery without considering the past or the war. There was silence for a few moments. With the silent elegance of a skilled assassin, Kakashi emerged from the forest's depths and squatted down next to her. His entire body exuded relaxation and laziness, with the exception of his shoulders, which revealed how tense he was. Even his shoulders were difficult to see. Natsumi would have missed it herself if she hadn't spent years training with the man and speaking Kakashi.sa. For a few minutes, they sat quietly and gazed up at the sky. Rasengan. The blue ball of energy whirled around in Kakashi's hand. The technique faded into nothing, and neither of them spoke. Although it was unquestionably not an apology, it was just as serious. The assassin with silver hair stood up straight and put both hands in his pockets. Let's go. Natsumi sighed, HN. She was spending too much time with people who had trouble pronouncing words correctly. They started moving quickly, and as they passed by, the forest turned into a haze of green. As Kakashi assumed point position, she fixed her gaze on his back. He was still upset with her, but she could likely handle that later. They had to locate Tsunade first. Kakashi was enraged, and that would be an understatement. It was bad enough that the redhead was aware of Minato Sensei's technique, but she actually used it as if she owned it in her fighting style. She seemed to be making fun of his legacy. Even after years of diligent work, Minato Sensei had not learned it completely. Since it was his legacy, only his son Naruto would be permitted to use it in that manner. There was no claim whatsoever from his apparent sister.in.law, who barely knew him. Rewind. Rasengan, nothing changed. Sensing the danger aura around the two humans, the forest animals remained silent despite the high air pressure. The sound of an active Rasengan and the gentle breathing of two humans were the only sounds audible on the forest floor as even the wind ceased to move. After a few moments, the Rasengan's sound also subsided. His voice was low as he asked, "How do you know that?" It was a nearly silent growl that would have gone unheard if not for the utter quiet of their surroundings. His head was lowered, his eyes were obscured by shadows, and his hands were clasped at his sides. Jiraiya. Sensei taught me. You have no right, broke the stillness. The ninja with silver hair scowled at his mission partner. Absolutely no right to know that technique, and even less right to incorporate it into your personal fighting style like it belongs to you. Have you no shame? Natsumi pulled back. She was unsure of how to react. You. Kakashi trembled in anger. With his hands in his hair, he began to pace. Natsumi had never witnessed the elder Kakashi behave in such a manner. She had witnessed him get angry, to be sure, but as he grew older, he behaved much more calmly because he was likely much more adept at managing his rage. I can't even fathom how you could possibly think that it would be okay for you to use it. How could you possibly? Kakashi clenched his jaw. He gave the time traveler one last glare before turning away. Before vanishing into the tall branches of the numerous trees encircling the campfire, he muttered, "I have first watch." As he stood guard, Kakashi gazed up at the night sky. He was sitting comfortably, his elbows locked to support his weight, his palms resting on the rough bark of one of the tallest branches of the tree he could find. Actually, it was fortunate that no one in the area had any plans to attack the split team. Despite his skill, the silver-haired ninja was too preoccupied with his thoughts to notice anyone approaching him from behind. The brooding ninja would have probably had to deal with being Kakashi's punching bag, so it was also fortunate that no one attempted to attack them. The copy ninja's brow was marked by a deep frown. How could she possibly use it so openly? How could she possibly know? Nay, Kakashi. Stop talking, Obito. Teme. Treating a deceased friend that way is unacceptable. Kakashi let out a sigh. He was aware that he was mentally ill and that he was having conversations with a deceased teammate in his head. However, all ninjas eventually become somewhat insane. The stresses of shinobi life are too much for one's psyche to handle. Eventually, you just have to cope with it. To him, Obito resembled his conscience, which had taken the shape of his longtime friend. They frequently spoke in his head, mostly when he was upset or confused, but also occasionally at the memorial stone and occasionally while he was reading his porn. In the same way that he would have argued with Obito if the Uchiha had been alive, they would discuss whatever was happening. Kakashi growled, "Go away, I am not in the mood," but like his old teammate, Obito's mental image persisted. Ignoring the animosity in Kakashi's voice, the Uchiha cocked his head in interest. Is it because the redhead is able to apply Sensei's method? The bark splintered as Kakashi's hold on the tree grew more firm. His eyes were closed and his mouth formed a grimace. After a while, when it was obvious that Kakashi would not speak, Obito went on, "Nay, Kakashi. What? You can also perform the Rasengan." Kakashi gave the Uchiha a fierce look. "She is not entitled to this." The ninja with the mental crack screamed at his consciousness. "I learned the technique directly from Sensei. In addition, I never use it." Teme. With a roar, the Uchiha pointed a finger accusing Kakashi. "You lack the chakra necessary for it, which is the only reason you don't use it." Kakashi tried to ignore him and went back to staring at the stars. Eventually, he said in a cool, collected voice, "Even if I did have the chakra, I wouldn't use it." Teme. "I don't believe you." Kakashi's face was palmed. With the voice of a defeated man who can scarcely prevail in a battle with his own thoughts, he muttered to himself, "Go away, Obito." "All right," said Obito, fading as he turned to leave. "Anyway, it's time to switch shifts. You'd better wake her up." Kakashi sighed, pushed himself to his feet, and brushed himself clean. His shoulders were slumped as usual, his eyes were half-lidded as usual, and he was still frowning. But he didn't appear to be the cool, lazy, and easygoing guy he usually was in that particular moment. He just had a broken appearance. His first impression was the scent of freshly cut grass, followed by the chirping of birds. When he opened his eyes, the sky was a vivid blue, and a gentle breeze brushed across his face. He forced himself into a sitting position gradually. All around him, the grass shifted gently in the wind. When he was younger, the team always used the old Konoha training ground, which is where he was. Kakashi frequently dreamed about this training ground, and he would frequently watch the younger him and his teammates train while receiving helpful advice from Minato Sensei. Even though it was sentimental, it was still one of his favorite dreams. All of them were still there, breathing and alive, still feeling comparatively content. The dream was a little different this time. Only Minato, training in the distance, was visible to Kakashi. Slowly, Kakashi approached the blonde man, absorbing the scene. "Sensei." Even though he could only see his teammates from a distance and could never communicate with them while dreaming, he always tried out of pure curiosity. Kakashi was therefore surprised when the blonde stopped what he was doing and met his eyes directly, his blue eyes glimmering with a bright smile. "Yo, Kakashi," was the man's cheerful greeting. "Sensei." Kakashi had been wanting to speak to his adopted father figure for a long time, but he was at a loss for words. "What are you doing here?" "Huh?" Minato asked, his head cocked slightly in confusion. As he rubbed the back of his head sheepishly, he smiled brightly once more and said, "Well, Kashi-kun, I am trying to create this super awesome new technique. Kakashi recalled. Oh? Really? It wasn't so much a dream as a memory. This was nearly identical to the time he had once entered Minato in an attempt to create the Rasengan. Yeah. The blond man's face brightened once more as he described the method. The man described the size he was aiming for with his hands. I think adding rotation might help stabilize it as well as add destructive power to it, he said, his blue eyes sparkling with excitement and determination. I got the idea from the tailed beasts. Amazing creatures they are, so powerful. I am trying to create the sphere-like bomb they use. Condensing my chakra into a small area is key to this. One of the greatest challenges Minato Sensei had always relished was developing a new technique. Oh. What are you going to call it? What am I going to call it? Minato appeared to be as taken aback by the question as he had been more than 10 years prior. For a young Kakashi, it was the most peculiar thing. Without knowing what he would call it, how could the man be developing a technique? But as he later learned for himself, the naming part always comes last, like the cherry on top of the icing or the icing on the cake. Minato finally responded, tapping his chin with his index finger in a reflective position. Haven't really thought of it. How about the destructive ball of doom that spins? Minato Sensei had never been good at naming things, though. One could only be grateful that Kushina.ne.san consistently persuaded him to substitute more poetic names for the ones he came up with. As his sensei continued his training, Kakashi unwinded on the training ground's plush grass. In his dream, it moved much more quickly than it did in reality. The blonde was now working on the last details of the last stage, nearly finished with it. Nay. Sensei? Kakashi cut the man off again. Hi. Kakashi.kun. Kakashi paused before responding, searching for the appropriate words. He had never asked Minato this question in person, so it was not part of the memory. How would you feel if an outsider used your technique? He had no idea what would happen. The question appeared to startle Minato a little. He said, scratching his temple while he considered a response. Well, they would have to be pretty awesome to use it. Kakashi questioned, won't you be mad? And was surprised that he didn't receive a more vehement response. Well, yeah, I suppose I would. Especially if they called it their own. Kakashi leapt with joy. Kakashi smiled and said, exactly my point, she has no right. His sensei concurred, saying she shouldn't be employing the method. Minato practiced for a few more moments. He spoke to his pupil without pausing his work, saying, Nay, Kakashi. With a joyful smile concealed behind his mask, Kakashi answered, Hi, sensei? Isn't that exactly what you do every day with your Sharingan, Mr. Copy? Cat. Ninja. Kakashi's expression fell. But, that's different. Oh. How so? How his sensei could even ask was beyond the comprehension of the silver-haired student. He did something completely different from what Natsumi had done. He wasn't stepping on the legacy of a hero. He did not inherit the best methods of a fallen comrade. With earnestness, he explained, I only copy the enemy's jutsu. It's completely different. Minato paused his work to smile sadly at Kakashi. He shook his head gently and said softly, that's even worse, Kakashi.kun. His eyes showed a hint of disappointment in his pupil. Imagine how you would feel if you used the Hireishin. Kakashi was too stunned to respond. However, if he was totally honest with himself, deep down in his thoughts, in the back of his mind, this was not what he had anticipated. He didn't like just copying other people's methods. As he returned to refining the Rasengan, Minato added, jutsu get copied all the time. That is the way our world works. This is why we must always strive to create new techniques and jutsu in order to surprise out enemies and get the upper hand, else our lives would be forfeit. Shortly thereafter, Kakashi had awoken from his slumber. He just lay in his sleeping bag and thought without moving or opening his eyes. Unconsciously, he feels that he shouldn't be too harsh on the Uzumaki woman for stealing his sensei's technique, as evidenced by his dream. He might even concede that it was possible she didn't take it from Minato in the first place. She had learned it from Minato. Sensei's sensei and Jiraiya Sama, her sensei. The Toad Sage, who was Minato's sensei, had some claim to Minato's adult skills, but that did not grant him unrestricted access to his pupil's unique methods. The Toad Sage was even more wrong for teaching Natsumi the technique than she was for using it as if she owned it. However, he was not entirely blameless. He followed their daily routine, even if he did it to keep the leaf safe. They probably didn't mean any harm when they did it. At a young age, Natsumi had to quickly learn how to control her chakra. Perhaps the Rasengan was the ideal instrument for teaching her how to manipulate her chakras. Her chakra chains, however, ought to have been an even better method of learning control because she was a pure Uzumaki. What prevented Jiraiya from concentrating on that instead? Maybe he ought to just ask Jiraiya about it later on. He was on an S-ranked mission at the moment. Later, he would give it some more thought. Kakashi packed his camping equipment and opened his eyes. Natsumi had already packed and prepared her belongings for departure. He sighed and rubbed his eyes. At the very least, they would need to get along for the remainder of the mission. In order to meet the redhead, Kakashi leapt into the trees. Without uttering a word, he created a Rasengan and allowed it to return to quiet. He admitted that she had employed the tactic, even though he was free to do the same if he so desired. In effect, even though he had no right whatsoever to assert that he had the authority to do so, he allowed her to use it in his presence in the event that they came into conflict with enemies. As they sped through the trees, Kakashi took the initiative. The next village was probably where Tsunade was. The mission would be completed and he would have more time to reflect if they could arrive quickly and somehow persuade her to return on time. As they traveled, the surrounding landscape became blurry, with occasional bursts of color breaking the monotonous green. A black snake, a colorful bird, some yellow flowers, a startled squirrel, and another snake. Kakashi had just begun to question why there were so many snakes in the area when he saw that Natsumi had run off in an unknown direction. In order to stay on the next branch he landed on, he immediately put more chakra on his feet. He studied his surroundings carefully. Nothing seemed out of place. No adversaries were in the vicinity. Silent as a deadly predator, he landed in a crouch. Why had his partner run off so quickly? There had to be a reason, surely. She had enough common sense to refrain from attacking every foreign nin they encountered. He returned to the location where she had vanished, sniffed the air for her scent, and then followed it. Even though he would have liked to, he was unable to complete this mission alone. In fact, the entire purpose of their partnership was for him to literally watch over her. She was his partner and he was a Konoha shinobi, which was another factor. She had been his teammate regardless of their disagreements. Never again would he abandon a teammate. She was far ahead of him, much farther than he had thought. It turned out that she was capable of traveling far more quickly than they had been doing so far. Kakashi clicked his tongue to increase their speed. If they had gone in this direction, they could have arrived at their destination yesterday. He reluctantly prepared for battle in his mind. At the end of the trail, he had no idea what to anticipate. Given that they weren't on a hunting mission and that Konoha had stringent regulations regarding enemy hunting, the possibility of an enemy would be rather strange. It was possible that Natsumi had somehow detected a troubled Konoha squad. There may be one or more adversaries waiting for them in that scenario, along with the potential for wounded or killed comrades who have been captured. If Natsumi had a connection to the victims, this might result in a fight motivated by retaliation. The outcome of this could have been disastrous. As a Jinchuriki, the hot-headed Uzumaki may lose emotional control, which could be harmful to all parties. Konoha may lose their Jinchuriki in the worst-case scenario. That Akatsuki group he had been briefed about might have set up some kind of trap. Kakashi began to examine the summoning signs. Another possibility was that the alleged Uzumaki was fleeing. She might still be a spy of some kind. The silver-haired man secretly continued to have doubts about his teammate. Given the amount of knowledge she possessed about Konoha and Minato, Sensei's son, he was not going to allow the imposter to get away with it. The experienced shinobi only needed a moment to stop on a tree trunk and smear some of his blood on the bark to finish the rite before continuing on his way, this time with a rather diminutive, sullen-looking pug in tow. "Yo, Kakashi." "Pakun," the summoner answered, ignoring his summon and carrying on with his journey. "I need you to help me track my partner." The pug's expression was one of annoyance toward the man. Seriously, Kakashi had the skills to follow his teammate on his own. This was no reason to wake him up from his morning slumber. With a hint of irritation in his voice, he questioned, "That red-haired female?" But instead of doing anything about it, his summoner merely nodded sharply in agreement. He took this very seriously. Maybe he became irritated with the man a little too quickly. "She is right up ahead." To show that he had heard him, the Junin nodded sharply once more. "How far?" Pakun sniffed for a long time while keeping his eyes closed to concentrate. He concentrated on the scent of the red-haired woman, noting how much it had already faded. This woman moves quickly. Her lack of scent is sufficient evidence of that. She had barely touched anything in their immediate vicinity. It appeared as though she had flown by the area in her hurry. And it wasn't just that. Something else was present here. The pug's suspicions were confirmed by another sniff. It's no surprise that Kakashi had to locate the woman quickly. She is traveling quite a bit faster than you, he finally said, his expression much more solemn, but has almost caught up to her target. Target? Kakashi asked, his expression betraying his bewilderment. Thus, his summoner was unaware of the situation. His touch was gone. Pakun calmly answered, I assumed you knew what your teammate was up to. She is currently hunting her prey. Hunting? The pug nearly grinned. Seeing Kakashi so bewildered was almost comical. The man rarely failed to understand what was going on around him. He said, smirking slightly, yeah. Just like a fox. It is actually quite amusing as her prey smells a lot like a snake. Kakashi's face went white, and he nearly fell over the next branch. Snake? You need to get your nose checked if you can't smell the snake, Kakashi. But for your information, your partner is at this moment busy gaining ground on Orochimaru. She will catch up with him soon. For a moment, Kakashi remained silent, speeding up as he mentally processed the situation. Could Natsumi be working with the snake? Is she definitely chasing him, or could they be retreating together? If she was, he would kill her. With no room for doubt, the pug responded in a matter of fact voice. Oh, she is most definitely chasing him. The most dangerous missing nin in Konoha was being pursued by his partner. Why would she do that, though? The man was too strong for her. Even if her style included the Rasengan. How could she possibly take on Orochimaru when she couldn't defeat Kakashi? With an entirely serious tone, he inquired, how long till she catches up with him? He would need to remove her from the situation as quickly as possible. No matter who she was, he would not allow his teammate to perish. With his eyes closed once more, the pug took a long sniff and said, give me a sec, now. Kakashi cursed. She has already overtaken him. Thus, he cannot prevent her from confronting him at all. His only hope was that he would arrive in time to save her. How long till we catch up? At this pace? About 10 minutes. Kakashi cursed once more. He would lose yet another teammate. The woman Minato. Sensei's son considered his aunt was about to pass away. He didn't like the woman, but she was necessary in Konoha. He had to fight to keep her alive. After pushing himself to the maximum speed that could still be regarded as cautious, Kakashi reached the battlefield about 7 minutes later. Nothing could have prepared him for the scene that was in front of him, even though he had already passed broken branches, bloodstains, discarded kunai, and numerous other indications of the fierce battle. His teammate, whom he had considered to be a weak fighter, was now facing off against Orochimaru of the Sannin. And she was in the lead. Fighting at the bottom of a massive crater, both fighters appeared to be more worn down, covered in bruises and scrapes, and completely worn out. Ninja fights don't usually last this long. Ninjas were designed to strike quickly. The fighter with less experience and skill would be eliminated in the first few blows. However, these two had been engaged in combat for over 7 minutes, hurling deadly blows at one another as if it were insignificant. It wasn't organic. The level at which Cage fought was this. He knew he could not get involved, as much as he would have liked to. He would only serve as the redhead's diversion. The idea made Kakashi grit his teeth. Had she been hiding something from him all along? Right now, Natsumi's eyes were red with cross-shaped pupils, and she was engulfed in golden flames. Her attacks lacked any grace. Kakashi was on the verge of labeling it brawling, as if she had no control over her actions and was just launching blind attacks. She appeared to be recovering from each wound Orochimaru caused her in a matter of seconds, which was the only reason she wasn't already dead. However, Kakashi could already tell her healing rate was slowing down in the brief time he had been watching. Her Biju could only heal her of so much. Natsumi performed a graceful backflip to avoid a group of diamond hard earth spikes, landing on just one hand while hurling some wind chakra. Enhanced kunai at her opponent with the other. A smirk appeared on the snake. Like man's face as he dodged with ease. This was not good because the snake Sannin usually had a plan when he looked like this. Natsumi gave a frustrated click of her tongue. The Jinchuriki was still in the air from the last half of her backflips when the traitor spat a ball of white-hot flames at her. His partner's eyes widened slightly in surprise as she was caught in the flames, and Kakashi took a deep breath. Natsumi hurried out of the flames a second later, appearing largely unharmed, her clothing smoldering slightly, but there were no cries of agony. She sliced the snake Sannin's legs with a swift flick of her wrist. With her arms raised to support a huge ball of chakra with wind blades spinning around it, the snake leapt up and directly into the path of a Natsumi clone who was waiting. Rasen Shuriken. Orochimaru collided with yet another enormous crater. As the dust settled, Kakashi watched in utter horror. The snake freak was still alive. In fact, and was shedding his skin like a snake. In order to protect himself from the dark chakra ball that the original Natsumi threw at him, he abruptly flipped through several well-known hand seals before smashing his hands to the ground and calling forth several enormous demonic doors. A bomb made of Biju, an elemental Rasengan, was used as a distraction by his partner, who just threw a Biju bomb at someone. Kakashi caught a glimpse of Natsumi's eyes widening in surprise as she prepared to jump, but she was only a split second too late because a massive snake sprang up out of the ground beneath her and ate her whole. Kakashi took another deep breath and leapt to the branch in front of him, prepared to join the battle and save his partner. However, hundreds of irate red-haired clones exploded from the snake, proving it was unnecessary. This was unbelievable. 27 seconds had passed between all of that. If he couldn't keep up with the altercation she was in, how could he possibly assist her? Orochimaru had vanished as the dust had cleared once more. A second later, Natsumi's clones vanished. She appeared to have reached her breaking point. The Jinchuriki gasped for air as her orange chakra cloak flickered twice before fading entirely. Even though his feet were already partially glued to the branch he was standing on with some sort of mud, Kakashi was only able to avoid the sudden earth spikes aimed at him thanks to his Junin instinct. With his fangs bared and poised to strike, he whirled in midair and sliced at the pale snake man above him. As the man he cut vanished in a cloud of smoke, Kakashi's eyes grew wide. The realization that the actual version of what he had just destroyed was right behind him caused the hairs on the back of his neck to stand on end. There wouldn't be enough time for him to duck. He sprang into action to protect himself from the man's teeth. A red-headed clone behind him was thrusting a tiny elemental Rasengan into the man's back at close range, probably tearing his insides out as it rotated and expanded, but not before he stabbed his sword right through her abdomen. Suddenly, Natsumi was between them, the kunai he had in his hand now in hers as she slashed at Orochimaru's neck, successfully decapitating him. The redhead smirked, blood seeping from the corners of her mouth. She laughed and said, "Regenerate from that, snake, freak." After landing from his leap, Kakashi looked at his partner. She strained to remain upright, her knees bent and shoulders slumped. Orochimaru's sword protruded from both sides of her. The hilt, which was angled so that the blade could not have missed her heart, was situated just below her left ribs. Even so, she was grinning while tears streamed down her face, which was marred by blood. Her eyes then rolled to the back of her head, and she fell to the ground below after toppling off the branch they were standing on. The red-headed Sannin Slayer was snatched out of the air by Kakashi, who caught her before she hit the ground. Without a doubt, she had just killed the snake Sannin, something he was unable to accomplish years ago. In fact, not even Jiraiya Sama had succeeded. Just before he landed, the headless, pale body had struck the earth with a thud that sounded empty. He was dead, really. Not like the numerous occasions he had successfully respawned himself. Sannin, the snake, was gone. After shaking himself out of his daze, Kakashi began evaluating his partner's injuries. He let out a loud curse. Shit. It was not a good look. Around her stab wounds, he detected the subtle, acidic smell of poison. The fact that Orochimaru's sword was still buried deep in the woman's chest, with the hilt's angle indicating that the blade had pierced her heart, didn't help either. However, she was still alive, albeit very faintly. Her eyes were still fluttering in and out of focus, which was miraculous. She was still awake. The Kyuubi must be putting in a lot of overtime in an attempt to mend all of her wounds. Since the blade might be the only thing preventing her from bleeding out, he wasn't sure if he should take it out. He said in a serious tone with a hint of desperation, "Stay with me, Natsumi." Another teammate was too important to him to lose. After finding his aunt, Naruto couldn't let her go so quickly. The Kyuubi might even break free if she died. For the nth time in his life, Kakashi found himself wishing he had the control required for medical ninjutsu. The redhead gave him a moment's attention. With a slight catch in her breath, she whispered, "Sensei." Her deep blue eyes were fixed with Kakashi's anxious gaze. "Why did you do that?" "You know me, Sensei," she said with a giggle. It sounded like excruciating pain. He suspected that in her fevered state, she had mistaken his silver hair for Jiraiya's white hair. With a gentle, hurt smile, she added, "I will never let my comrades die. Not again anyway, it's my nindo." Her voice trailed off at the end. Almost before she could finish her sentence, she had fainted. As he held her and closed his eyes to consider his next move, Kakashi sagged and said, "Natsumi. Pull the kami. Damn sword out, you silver-headed waste of space." The deep voice made Kakashi jump, and his eyes popped open. He could feel the annoyance of bright red eyes staring back at him. Kyubi. The demon deadpanned. No, it's the Shodime's mother. Of course it's me, you stupid shit. Now pull the sword out so I can heal the girl. How the hell am I supposed to keep her alive with a sword through her heart? And she told me you were intelligent. Just goes for show how absolutely useless you humans are. No common sense. Kakashi reached for the sword's hilt and swiftly but carefully withdrew it. He frantically obeyed the nine-tailed beast, his eyes wide. The blade cleared Natsumi's chest with an unsettlingly smooth sound. As he watched in wonder as the red chakra spread from the wound, Kakashi let the blade fall with a clatter. Then a chilling fear began to creep into his blood. With his eyes wide and his face rapidly turning pale with fear, he whispered shakily, "Are you breaking free?" The Kyubi's deep voice betrayed its annoyance as it responded, "No, you moronic ape. Now bandage her wounds, I can't heal it all." Natsumi was already looking better, but the red chakra was gradually disappearing. Her chest was no longer bleeding heavily, and her face was less pale. Over the entrance wound, the silver-haired nin could see new skin growing at a startling rate. After a few seconds, the chakra vanished and the wound was fully closed. He checked the seal on Natsumi's shirt. Everything appeared as it should have, and it was still whole. After numbly retrieving every bandage from his pack, Kakashi began tending to his partner's numerous wounds. As stated, the Kyubi had not completely healed everything. As Kakashi processed the fact that he had just spoken to the most powerful of the Biju and that it had called him an idiot, his mind was racing with fragmented ideas. He did not know exactly what to think. Natsumi woke up to an agonizing world. She groaned as she attempted to recall how she had come to be in this situation. Orochimaru. The time traveler pushed herself to sit, her mind still hazy, and grunted. Her eyes widened abruptly, and she screamed in terror, "Shit, Kakashi," as she struggled to get out of her blankets. Her confused mind didn't bother to try to calmly sense whether the man was nearby, which would have made the woman's suffering much less. The man she was looking for gently caught her as she stumbled out of the tent, half tripping over the blankets that were now gathered up around her ankles. She looked into Kakashi's only visible eye and exhaled in relief, saying, "Oh, thank Kami you are alive." As she made to straighten her rumpled clothes, she quickly regained her balance and pushed herself away from the copy.nin. Beneath her orange tank, which was obviously worn out, she could see bandages. "Natsu-chan, you ought to be sleeping," the man teased, grinning. "Natsu-chan?" Without even blushing at the implication, she said, "You dressed my wounds." They scarcely had the luxury of modesty as ninja. Which would you prefer, letting your partner sneak a peek and saving your life, or keeping your modesty and dying? Usually not a very tough decision. In particular, because they were ninja and thus had the bad luck of witnessing a lot of nudity anyway. When the target was at their most vulnerable, like while sleeping or taking a bath, it was usually the best time to hit them. Other pursuits. Dressing a partner's wounds rarely involved anything more than applying a bandage, possibly with antibacterial salves to prevent infection. Kakashi, who had clearly just left his seat by the fire to catch his awkward partner, responded in a bored tone, "It was necessary. The Kyubi said it couldn't heal everything." What? Natsumi gave Kakashi her utmost scowl. Kyubi is male. He is not an it. Surprised, silver eyebrows shot upward. "You speak with it?" He was persuaded to take a slight detour when Natsumi suddenly revealed his intention to kill him. The redhead said icily, "He is a dear friend of mine, Kakashi-san. I suggest you give him the respect he is due. How would you like it if I called Pakun an it?" With a stern tone, he retorted, "Pakun didn't destroy the village. Like many others, he detested Kurama because of what had transpired years before. After all, they thought he just broke free and attacked because he felt like it, so it wasn't entirely irrational." Well, she wouldn't have ruled out him trying if things had gone differently, even though that wasn't the case. "Hey, oh, you know that if you had believed that you could demolish the place without getting sealed again, you would have enjoyed doing so." Fine. Kurama rolled her eyes and sighed, turning her head away from his jailer's accusing, playful gaze. "I suppose it would have been enjoyable. But I'm not that stupid. I understand." Natsumi smiled and reached up to stroke his muzzle. Natsumi said steadily and slowly, "You have no idea what happened that night." This was likely to get her into trouble with the Sandame. Kyubi was being controlled. And even if he wasn't, it would be perfectly reasonable for him to be angry at the people keeping him a prisoner for decades on end, simply for existing. Kakashi's eyes were focused and keen as he lowered his book. "What do you mean control?" "I'll tell you what I know once we are back in the village. You can ask the Hokage for confirmation if you so please. In her mind, she added, and I can actually get permission to tell you. Sarutobi would not be pleased. After a moment of silence, the Junin shrugged. Very well. He dropped it for the time being, shifting his tone to one that was more relaxed as he returned his attention to his favorite books. So, why don't you tell me exactly how my cute partner managed to defeat the most powerful of the Sannin, when she was having trouble sparring with little old me just a few days ago? She shrugged and said, I had no restrictions this time. My techniques are a bit too disruptive for the training grounds, and using Kurama's chakra would have caused panic, plus I wasn't sure how you would react to the Rasengan. I need to know what you are capable of if we are going to be working together. Her masked partner gave her a look that made her falter. She was aware that her justifications were weak. The man's gaze returned to the pages of Icha. Icha, seemingly pleased by the statement. I promise we can have a proper spar once this mission is finished. I'll hold you to it, Natsu-chan. What's with the nick.name, Kashi.kun? He smiled at her and cocked his head slightly, saying, Ma, if you are willing to take a sword for me, then there is no reason for me to not accept you as my comrade. Is that a blush I see, Natsu-chan? Don't worry, I kept my eye closed while bandaging you. It's the fever, Baka, and you have 2 eyes, bastard. The nin, still grinning behind his mask, turned a page and said, would you look at that, it's a big day for Natsu-chan. Killing a Sannin and learning to count in the same 24 hours. With a sigh, pervert, Natsumi made her way back to the tent. She needs to get more sleep. When will you be ready to travel? After assessing her physical condition and consulting Kurama, she responded, I should be fine by tomorrow. Kurama is just having some trouble with the poison. Kurama? Kyuubi's name. A growl of rage and enough profanity to make B red in the face interrupted her. Oh, shut it, you bastard fox. If you want people to be nice to you, they need to know your name. To explain her expression, Kakashi merely gave her a questioning glance. Kurama does not think you are worthy of knowing his name yet. She waved her hand in response, seemingly dismissing the tailed beast's annoyance. He's pretty pissed at me for telling you. Yet, if you shove that idiotic silver monkey ass into gear and screw that useless and moronic head on right, he believes you might have potential. Take it as a compliment. A month or so later, the 2 Junin enter a bar. It was just another bar. A few people are strewn about the different small, round tables in the dimly lit room. Some of the civilians looked at them with mild suspicion. Natsumi even saw a man wearing a fake calm face, as if to cover up whatever it was he had been selling. The red-headed Junin said, there she is. What the man was selling didn't really matter to her. Her partner shrugged, his face buried in an orange book, and said, HN. After avoiding them for so long, Natsumi approached the slug princess. The fact that the woman had been avoiding them for the past few weeks was painfully obvious. It became clear that the blonde had left town in the middle of the night without paying for the room she had rented each time they believed they had caught up to her. The fact that Natsumi had far more important things to do than play hide and seek with Tsunade was rather annoying. Tsunade had long been a self-centered bitch, regardless of how much she loved the Hokage. When Natsumi arrived at the woman, she said, Tsunade-sama. Tsunade had a bottle of sake in her slender fingers as she leaned on the bar. They clutched the porcelain as though it were a lifeline, and they appeared surprisingly fragile. Tsunade yelled. Finally caught up, did you? Tsunade did not look good at this point in her life, something Natsumi had not recognized when she was 12. The woman appeared exhausted, even though her true form was concealed by her incredibly strong genjutsu. Tun was sleeping on Shizun's mentor's lap as she sat next to her. She also didn't look very good. Natsumi suppressed a sigh. Because Tsunade was so self-centered at the moment, she was unaware that her apprentice was experiencing the same level of depression as she was. She was obviously unhappy with her current situation, but she would never leave Tsunade's side. As was customary, she bowed slightly and said, I would like to thank you for allowing us to catch up with you, Tsunade-sama. It wasn't a lie. They had been able to catch up to Tsunade. It was clear that she had grown weary of having to stay on the run rather than engage in her favorite activities. Cut the crap, girlie. What do you want? My partner and I have been sent by the Sandaime Hokage. Sama. He wishes for you to return to the village as soon as is possible. The Sannin snorted, that is not going to be read anytime soon. Now trotter of and go tell the senile old coot I'm not returning. Shizun exclaimed, Tsunade-sama, in a tiny voice. As a woman, Natsumi did not have many patience. She turned the stool so the woman was facing her and growled, listen here, hag. When Tsunade's eyes finally appeared, they were dangerously narrow. "I propose a wager," Natsumi went on. "I challenge you to an arm wrestle. If you win, we will leave you alone. If I win, you return to Konoha." In the bar, there was quiet. The blonde was the Senju Tsunade, who was said to be the strongest woman in the world, and everyone there had heard enough about what was happening to know that it was probably not the best idea to challenge her to an arm wrestle. The blonde woman in question burst out laughing. "Ha!" she exclaimed. "Are you stupid?" Natsumi responded with a tiny pout behind her scarf, turning her head away. "I have been told that I am not the sharpest kunai in the pouch." Tsunade laughed and threw back her head. "Very well, brat. Let's get this over with," she said with a laugh, her arm ready as she turned to Natsumi. "Not in my bar," the bartender yelled abruptly from a few feet away where he was polishing glasses. The blonde strutted out of the bar with her drink in hand, grunting. Evidently curious to see how ninja arm wrestle, half the bar followed her out. They didn't get to witness the Tsunade displaying some of her well-known strength very often. Despite giving Natsumi a doubtful glance, Kakashi allowed her to walk past him. He had reluctantly given her the opportunity to try to persuade the woman to join them, even though she had asked him to trust her in this. He would give Tsunade the scroll the Sandaime had given them if that didn't work. Tsunade would be classified as a missing nin if she failed to return. That was obviously not the best way to get the medic to come back. It's possible that Tsunade will just turn into a missing nin. That is definitely not good news for Konoha. Are there 2 Sannin leaving the village? Not good, for sure. However, since there would be no threat of war, Tsunade would be hunted down like an animal from every country. She was the world's greatest medic. Nin and the Shoden's granddaughter. Any village would benefit greatly from having her. She had plenty of enemies, too. She would spend the rest of her life on the run. After a while, the 2 kunoichi reached a flat-looking stone outside the small town where the bar had been. The 2 kunoichi positioned themselves across from the stone that would be their table. Their referee was a volunteer from the general public. The poor man stood between them, trembling with excitement. The fact that he had not yet wet himself struck Natsumi as a great miracle. That applied to the majority of the people they had met along the way. Natsumi sighed and shook her head. A betting pool was even being established. Standing to her right was Kakashi. To watch the match, he had even taken off his headband and put away his book. Definitely to ensure that Tsunade didn't cheat. Shizune, who was to Tsunade's left, bit her lip a little and appeared to be clinging to Tun for support. "Come one come all," their referee said, clearing his throat and gesturing to the audience while waving his arms, presumably to appear more dramatic. "We are here." With a hint of murderous intent, Tsunade impatiently interrupted the man, saying, "Just start the damned match already." The glare she gave him made the poor civilian squeak. Hi. Tsunade and Natsumi clasped hands in preparation. His strong, dramatic voice had now effectively scared their referee, who stampeded, "Are ready." Around the blonde, chakra flared. With a smug expression, Tsunade's ponytails fluttered in the wind. With a foxy grin, Natsumi transformed into Kyuubi, surrounded by dancing orange flames. Her opponent frowned, her flawless golden eyebrows nearly touching as her eyes narrowed. Go. For years to come, people would recount what happened in bars. Natsumi used her amazing speed to counteract Tsunade's insane strength. She recalled that he had previously defeated Tsunade in a comparable situation. Tsunade faltered with mild confusion, losing some of her strength as Natsumi gave no resistance to the first inch of movement, actually allowing some space between their hands. Then, with amazing speed, Natsumi raised her hand again. Taking Tsunade's tiny hand in her own, she took advantage of the situation and pushed Tsunade's arm back so hard that the rock broke as soon as Tsunade's fist struck the ground. The blonde lost her balance due to the action's momentum. Tsunade was on the ground with the back of her hand touching a piece of the broken rock when the dust settled. Tsunade tore her hand violently from Natsumi's grasp. As she straightened out her hair and got to her feet, she complained, "You spoke to that ruffian, didn't you?" She picked herself up and headed back to the bar, leaving a stunned audience in their wake. With one of his most patronizing smiles, Kakashi appeared to have bet himself and was now collecting his winnings. Natsumi answered, "I did not speak with her personally, but I did hear about it." Tsunade closed her eyes and rubbed her temples, sighing, "I should have known there was something fishy going on. No one in their sane mind would arm wrestle against me unless they had something up their sleeves. I blame the alcohol." Natsumi ignored Shizune's disbelieving gaze as she allowed the renowned medic to guide them back to the bar. After some time, they were sitting together and sharing a bottle of sake at a different bar on the opposite side of town, where the news had not yet spread. The blonde Kunoichi finally said, "Who are you? I recognize the Hitaki brat, but I have never heard of you." Tsunade took a long swig directly from the bottle as Natsumi slowly lowered her scarf, revealing her entire face for the first time. Before setting something in front of her drinking companion, she returned the porcelain bottle to the bar. The blonde put her hand to her chest right away. Natsumi pictured the bewilderment she must be experiencing. There was only one such necklace, after all, and Tsunade wore it around her own neck at the moment. In addition, the one on the bar had clearly been broken at one point. To make it appear as though they were merely engaging in small talk at the bar, Natsumi used a tiny privacy jutsu around them. To calm herself, the redhead closed her eyes and inhaled deeply. Tsunade's bewildered brown eyes were staring back at her when she opened her eyes. Sharpening her eyes, she squared her shoulders. "It's a bit of a long story, and I am not the best at explaining this, so bear with me. My name used to be Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto, Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, Toad Sage and Rokudaime Hokage of Konoha." It would be an understatement to say that Shizune was taken aback when her mentor chose to keep his end of the bargain and go back to Konoha. Instead of sneaking away in the middle of the night as she had anticipated, she found herself and Tsunade Sama together. On what looked to be a lovely day, it was just before sunrise. The birds were chirping, the air was crisp, the skies were clear, and the slight breeze still carried the subtle scent of dew. With her head cocked slightly downward to conceal the obvious bewilderment in her eyes as she attempted to make sense of everything, Shizune fastened her backpack. Prior to leaving for that afternoon drink, Tsunade Sama was normal. However, after that, something changed. She had just told Shizune to be prepared to depart for Konoha at first light after returning to their hotel room. The Sannin had appeared shaken and distracted, and something was off. Since her uncle's passing, Shizune had not witnessed her acting so unsure, terrified, and distressed. The red-headed Kunoichi, who had defeated her master in an arm wrestle the previous day, caught the brunette Nin's attention. She was certain that the woman was involved in this. She was able to defeat the Tsunade of the Sannin in an arm wrestle, and the two appeared to click right away. The red-headed and blonde Kunoichi were chatting casually as Tsunade Sama gripped her necklace as the four ninja got ready to depart for the lengthy journey. As they all began running and the surroundings became hazy, Kakashi cut her thoughts short and turned her dark eyes to observe him. "Let's go." Kakashi Hitaki. She recalled him from their early years. He grew up as everyone expected him to, handsome and strong. But he was still a complete jerk, and now he read porn in the middle of the day. That was the issue with powerful ninja, particularly those who were young prodigies. Always, they wind up a little strange. Shizune realized that within a year or two, both of his teammates and his sensei had passed away. Anyone could get messed up by that alone. The sudden loss of both her brother and her lover left even Tsunade Sama in a state of turmoil. At least he wasn't going on a murderous rampage like the young Uchiha from a few years ago, and he was just reading porn. That was insane in yet another way. Maybe ninjas were just generally crazy. Maybe she was also a little crazy and didn't know it. After all, she had a pet pig. As the small group took a few minutes to rest, Natsumi took a slow sip of water. They were on track and should arrive in Konoha in the upcoming week. Even though he had succeeded in getting Tsunade to return to Konoha earlier than expected, the time traveler still had a lot of work to do. She was unsure of the plan's next step. Maybe she ought to meet with Shikaku and the Sandaime as soon as they returned. She was aware that Shikaku had a plan in place, but what was it? Would it be different if she had already killed Orochimaru? Would it significantly alter the timeline? By now, was Orochimaru still a member of Akatsuki? Because one of their own was killed by a Konoha ninja, were they going to concentrate on Naruto earlier? However, the snake had not been cloaked. In any case, what was he up to when she happened to stumble upon him? You should tell the Hitaki brat. As her former Hokage's doppelganger unknown currencying sat down beside her and began drinking water from a canteen, Natsumi's thoughts were interrupted. They casually turned on a slight sound distortion seal to conceal their conversation from the other members of the team. When the seal was activated, Kakashi arched an eyebrow, but a second later he resumed reading his porn. She, Tsunade, and Shizune were still not people he trusted. Unfortunately, she also didn't think much of him. She said nonchalantly, "He doesn't need to know. After all, he didn't really need to know." Tsunade clicked her tongue in frustration and said, "Cut the crap, brat. just because you had feelings for your version of the man. After a considerable amount of coughing and spluttering, the poor redhead finally recovered her voice. She had been drinking water at the wrong time. What? She squawked, loud enough that the seal could not muffle the sound, drawing strange looks from Shizune and Kakashi. Kakashi signed that they would be departing again in 2 minutes, raising one goddamned eyebrow once more. With a playful twinkle in her eyes, Tsunade raised a delicate eyebrow and asked, "What? You don't think I could notice the way you spoke about your sensei? It's not that hard to figure out, brat." Natsumi gave the woman beside her best death stare. "I still don't see why he needs to know. The less people that know about this the better. His best childhood friend is alive, he deserves to know." As she stood up, trembling, the time traveler snorted, "That man also started the war that killed everyone, Kakashi included. He will find out eventually." "He won't." Natsumi and Tsunade were both agitated at this point. After all, neither woman was renowned for her patience. When Tsunade stepped on the seal, she twisted her foot to tear it. "The man is not stupid," she scowled. "He already knows you are hiding something big. He is involved in what's going to happen whether you like it or not, so he needs to be prepared." The blonde gave Tsunade one final, well known, and enraged glare before leaving to join her apprentice a short distance away. Natsumi let out a little cry of exasperation and kicked the tree beside her. The lady was annoying. Kakashi abruptly said, "Let's go," closing his book and grinning at her, before Natsu-chan destroys the forest. Whatever you want to say about the man, he could continue to smile even after receiving a death stare and several threats of death from an enraged Jinchuriki. When Tsunade saw the tears in her sensei's eyes as he processed the news that one of his own ninja had killed his student, she would never acknowledge that her heart was uncomfortably tight. Despite Orochimaru's disgusting nature, Sensei was able to recall the child he had once been. Even Tsunade was reminiscing about their enjoyable team moments. Orochimaru the child did not deserve to end up the way he did, but Orochimaru the man did deserve to die. Maybe things would have turned out differently if she and Jiraiya had been better teammates. Looking down at the black scroll that once held the body of a man he once thought of as one of his own children, Hiruzen muttered, "I see. Tsunade-chan," he said, looking expectantly at his other student with hazel eyes, "we will need to perform an autopsy." She cut him off, saying, "Shizune is qualified to handle something like this." "Ah, very well. Shizune my dear, if you would please help the other med.nin perform the autopsy as soon as possible. I will get started as soon as this meeting is dismissed, Hokage-sama." "Thank you my child, you have grown into a strong and capable young kunoichi." Then Shizune bowed low and said in a low voice, "Thank you, Hokage-sama." The elderly village leader went on, "Very well. Natsumi-chan, Kakashi-kun, good job on completing your mission successfully. Thank you for returning to the village Tsunade, my dear. We have a lot to discuss about the hospital and future plans involving the academy, but for now I believe you all deserve a rest." Dismissed. The small group of ninja left their Hokage to deal with the heartbreaking news he had just received, each making their own way. As soon as the Sandaime said, "Dismissed," Kakashi was gone, and Tsunade went to her former clan grounds. Shizune went to the hospital, and Natsumi went to the academy. Natsumi arrived at the academy just as the last bell rang. With heavy bags on their backs and worn-out faces, children poured out of the doors. When she first saw him, even Naruto appeared a little worn out. Natsumi was aware of the curriculum change, but it might have been a little too demanding for the kids. The young blonde was half-heartedly arguing with Sasuke about something or other, with a somewhat dejected expression on his face. But he saw her rather quickly, his eyes widening in surprise before he rushed excitedly to her, leaving a somewhat bewildered Uchiha air in his wake. The eager little Jinchuriki called out, loud as ever, "Natsumi! Bakken!" to get his classmates' attention. Sasuke gave her his most venomous glare, so full of hatred and disdain that Natsumi was momentarily stunned. How could Sasuke hate her already when she hadn't even met him? Although Shikamaru appeared somewhat taken aback, he examined her with a keen sparkle in his eyes. Well, an inquisitive Shikamaru was only going to cause him to learn something he shouldn't have. Her own blonde counterpart slammed into Natsumi before she had a chance to see any of the other doubles from her past. "You're back." His excitement made the redhead laugh a little, saying, "Lower your voice, brat, I hardly think the rest of the village cares." An irate voice replied, "I wouldn't be so sure, Uzumaki-san." When Natsumi looked up, Amino Iruka was furious. When Iruka-sensei was upset with her, Natsumi could never take it and he was undoubtedly upset with her. When she was younger, she had nightmares about him because of his thin-lipped face, hands on his hips, and furious frown. Uzumaki-san, do you even realize what I have had to deal with these last few weeks after you encouraged your nephew to up his pranking level? But you said I should prank people, arched Naruto's brow and crossed his arms in a pout. Why'd I need to do punishment training? Told you Shikamaru started it. He suggested that we do all three of our teaching skills at the same time. With a smile on her face, Natsumi prepared to give her poor nephew the training session of a lifetime. She gave a small laugh and then continued with a slightly savage eye smile, saying, "Oh honey, I'm not punishing you for the pranking. I'm punishing you for getting caught. Besides, you didn't get caught when you followed Shikamaru-kun's plan, you got caught afterwards, meaning you didn't learn anything." The tiny blonde stared at his aunt with wide eyes. I already had to do detention, twice. Naruto would never acknowledge that his aunt's gentle, sadistic laugh sent chills down his spine and made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Good motivation to not get caught again, nay? At the sound of his lone relative's voice, the poor aspiring prankster's face quickly turned pale. There were two things that were for sure. First of all, when she felt like it, his aunt was frightening. Second, he would meticulously plan out his next pranks, making it impossible for anyone to ever catch him. From a secure and comfortable perch in one of the trees encircling the training area, Kakashi observed his teammate instructing her nephew. So far, he had to admit, it had been pretty entertaining to watch the red-headed woman use training to beat her blonde relative into the ground. Perhaps there were benefits to becoming a Junin sensei if this was how training a genin felt. He could only speculate about the potential for sadistic training. For the nth time that day, Kakashi's eye wrinkled with laughter as the blonde brat finally passed out from exhaustion and made a sincere vow to his aunt that he would never, ever be caught pulling pranks again. He decided to make an appearance and snapped his book shut. As he emerged in a tornado of dust and leaves, the silver nin said, "Yo." He had spent years perfecting the lazy slouch that was his posture. The redhead gave a mock salute in response. "Yo, enjoy the show?" "Very much so," he muttered, turning to face the day's victim. It was very entertaining. Even though the poor child was exhausted, the blonde's glare, which he likely found extremely frightening, ended up being more endearing than anything else. Natsumi laughed at what she saw. "So, what do you want?" The female Uzumaki received a smile from Kakashi, who said, "I came for that spar you promised, Natsu-chan." Natsumi sighed. This was just so annoying. Well, we would have to make some arrangements for that. Wouldn't want the village to panic. I'll talk to Hokage-sama about it when I can. I've already had a conversation with him. It's been scheduled for tomorrow at noon. The silver-haired shinobi smiled. "Well then, I'll leave you to torturing your nephew in Pisa. Don't be late." His voice was sickly sweet, and he vanished in a swirl of leaves. Who was that individual? Naruto huffed from his eagle-spread position on the grass, looking tired and irritated. Natsumi moaned angrily, "He's my teammate." With his knees trembling a little, the blonde huffed once more as he attempted to stand up. "Why are you going to spare him? His hair is strange." The blonde had somehow decided that someone with such strange hair was probably strange as well and probably not worth a fight. With slightly wrinkled eyes, Natsumi answered, "Yeah, it does appear somewhat humorous, doesn't it? He's a really good ninja though." She was always bugging the man about his gray, silver hair, and it was encouraging to see that her counterpart would likely follow suit. "More powerful than you?" After giving it some thought, the elder Uzumaki decided that Kakashi was definitely not to be trifled with. Finally, she said, "I guess we will see tomorrow." Naruto's face lit up with a brilliant smile, stars dancing in his eyes, and he realized that he had the chance to witness his aunt actually fight someone. "Bakken. Is it possible for me to observe? Will you kick him in the ass? Are you able to kick his ass? Am I able to? Could I please?" "You have school tomorrow, Naruto. But Bakken, would you please?" "Naruto, this is the kind of fight that might not be safe for people to watch," Natsumi said, gently ruffling her nephew's hair. "It will be risky to be near us. Please Bakken. I'll talk to the Hokage about it, but I can't make any promises." Natsumi sighed, glaring at her own vulnerability for the puppy do look. Note to self, Naruto has definitely mastered the look. This battle is going to be risky. Yada. Eventually, the two Uzumakis headed to their favorite ramen stand, where Natsumi had been waiting for an excuse to indulge in some of the delectable noodles and Naruto's stomach had begun to complain about the workout. "Oji-san. I'm famished. Ow. When Naruto barged into the tiny ramen stand and yelled loudly at the elderly ramen chef in what he believed to be a friendly greeting, his aunt, who had initially made him so hungry, slapped him on the back of the head. What the hell was that for Obeken? The blonde turned his accusing and hurt blue eyes to meet his aunt's exact shade of blue. Ow. Oi. Ichiraku-san can hear you well enough, his odd head. Smacking aunt said in a cheerful but firm tone. So there's no need to yell, nephew. Furthermore, that is not how you greet people. Repeat. Again, what? Greet Ichiraku-san properly. But, the redhead Uzumaki held up a menacing hand, threatening to give him another grating slap on the back of his head if he didn't comply. Her frightening expression caused Naruto to quickly backtrack. Good afternoon, Ichiraku. Oja-san, Ayame-chan. With a peculiar twinkle in her blue eyes, as if she were amused at him or something, Naruto's aunt grinned at him and said, well done. At this point, the Ichirakus were both on the verge of tears from laughter. Good afternoon, Naruto-kun. Ayame laughed and wiped her eyes. Natsumi-san, it's nice to see you again. This time, the chef's daughter pondered the blonde Uzumaki's hair. Naruto-kun here ate all of the vegetables we gave him while you were away, like a good little ninja. Training. The poor blonde was muttering to himself as he reached for some chopsticks and waited for the ramen chef to finish up his order. Naruto felt his face turning red as all the adults laughed. He had only wanted to greet his aunt before receiving punishment training, and now he just wanted some noodles, but everyone was laughing at him instead. Don't take it so seriously, Naruto-kun, he said quietly, wiping his hands with a damp towel, with a steaming bowl of deliciousness thrust in front of him a few minutes later. We aren't making fun of you, my boy. This is just what it's like to have a family. Being teased and taught manners are just two aspects of it. It indicates that we value you. The remainder of the evening was spent in a similar fashion, with everyone making fun of each other. Naruto even had the opportunity to make fun of his aunt as payback for the training and hair. Musing he had to endure. Before long, it was time to go home and sleep, and the little families said their goodbyes. Suddenly, Naruto and Natsumi were strolling down the street in a relaxed silence, their bellies full of delectable ramen, and their faces beaming with satisfaction. Natsumi's soft voice broke the silence, I'm proud of you, you know. When Naruto looked up at her, he saw that her face had been raised to gaze at the stars while they were walking. His heart felt like it was about to burst, but in a positive way. Really, you have grown a lot while I was away, Naruto, and I am incredibly proud of you, his aunt said, pulling down her scarf as she knelt down so that their eyes were level and grinning at him in a way that no one had ever done before. I'm so proud of you that I believe you may be prepared for some more complex methods. Sure. The young Jinchuriki was bouncing on the spot with a grin so big it was threatening to split his face in two, but he calmed down a little after his aunt gave him a slightly playful glare. Oh, I'm sorry. Really, how do you feel about being able to walk on water and walls, nephew? Two identical smiles, the kind that portended trouble in the near future, would be visible to anyone looking toward the small Uzumaki family. Ryoto, I'm exhausted, as I mentioned. We recently returned from an extended mission. All I want to do is return home and sleep in my own bed. You must live a little, Kento. Enjoy yourself and meet some women. We ought to make the most of our time. Ryu, you are worrying about nothing. Nothing? Iwa has shut down all of its borders, and if we believe the rumors from travelers, Kumo has improved their academy just as much as we have. So what, therefore, I want to have accomplished all of my life's ambitions, including numerous female conquests, if war breaks out. And since none of my partners die virgins, you are accompanying me. I'm not a virgin, you may as well be a. Ryatoa. Just one drink mate, it will be fun. All right, but I'm going to bed now. I want to get enough sleep if there is going to be war. Sometimes you are such a rusted out kanai. When we're all dead, rest. As he emerged from the darkness, Shikaku stifled a sigh. He had no idea how quickly the news was spreading. The academy's curriculum needed to be changed, but as it was, they were on the verge of war before any other significant events occurred. Their ability to use Uzumaki's memory of her past as a model for future planning was eroding. Daddy-a, just a little longer honey-a. Looking at the ceiling over her father's shoulder, Ino rolled her eyes and sighed. Daddy, let go, with a hint of irritation. I need to get to the academy. After giving her a particularly firm squeeze and releasing his grip, her father firmly grasped her by the shoulders and gave her a serious expression. Honey, he said slowly, his face displaying worry, are you certain you want to be a kunoichi? Konoha has some excellent civilian schools. You could work as a baker, florist, or... Daddy, please stop. I will become a kunoichi, a stunning, powerful, and remarkable kunoichi. As she made her point, the smallest of the blondes showed off her gradually growing muscles. Buddha, no. As her father drew her into another tight embrace, Ino nearly squeaked. She was unaware of her dad's recent behavior, but it was unusual for him to try to prevent her from attending school. If she was unable to attend school, how could she possibly become a strong and attractive kunoichi and impress Sasuke? Additionally, since that change a few weeks ago, school had become much more interesting. The new kunoichi classes, where students learned from actual Jonin kunoichi, were particularly well liked by Ino. Seeing what they were capable of was incredible. The most shocking lesson she had learned in the first place was that dieting would kill Hera, and most likely in a cruel and pitiful way. Unlike the other kunoichi instructors, the Jonin kunoichi had not been kind to them. They had to spar, go through obstacle courses, and learn more about the useful qualities of plants and how to use flowers for missions than how to make them look pretty, all of which were crucial if you wanted to convey secret messages. Moreover, Ino had never considered hiding the aburame bugs behind flowers. Giving the insects a reason to be there while they are snooping on people was such a clever idea. After letting his daughter go, Inoichi stood up and brushed the small amount of dust from his knees. Okay. Can I at least walk my little princess to the academy, or are you already too cool for that? When her father used the word cool, Ino was nearly as appalled as she was when he used the puppy dog face. Okay daddy, but this is the last time. She let out a sigh and gave her father a stern finger gesture. At that, her father appeared to relax his shoulders and smile a little. Thank you, honey. Naturally, Billboard Brow approached her with a smirk as soon as her father dropped her off at school. So, Ino.Pig, you still require your father to walk you to school. Will you be able to cope with being a kunoichi? Ino gave the pink-haired girl's arm a powerful right hook in return, then relaxed and turned back to face her father's back as he walked slowly to work with his shoulders hunched. I'm not sure, Billboard Brow. Dad has been acting strangely lately. The two girls went to class when the bell rang. How so? Sakura answered in a quiet, a little anxious tone. Over the past few weeks, they had somewhat reconnected. Before you become friends with someone, you can only spar with them so many times. Punching each other in the face every day seemed to restore their relationship, for some reason. Like, this morning he tried to convince me to become a civilian, a baker, of all things. What? However, I believed your father wanted you to become a ninja. Yeah, I thought so too. Maybe he thinks I'm not strong enough to do it, Ino said, her shoulders dropping slightly as her voice began to show fear and uncertainty. Sakura smiled brightly and encouragingly at her before giving her a gentle shoulder punch. Well, we will just have to show him that we can kick ass, right? All right. Hey, would you like to train after this? Everyone's attention was drawn to the loud voices of the Uzunakas as they entered the room, interrupting the girls. But Oba-chan, stop shouting Naruto. But you are shouting too. I am trying to get you to speak more softly. Buddha, Naruto was interrupted when his aunt closed her eyes and inhaled deeply while covering his mouth with her gloved hand and pinching the bridge of her nose with her other hand. Okay. Enough with that now. But I'd really like to see your spar, Oba-chan. Perhaps I can even learn something from it. I'll talk with the Hokage about it, promise? I promise that I'll ask. I don't know what he will say though. Okay. Thanks Oba-chan. There are more children here than I expected. The Hokage believed that they might learn something from it. Furthermore, my nephew has a method for influencing the Hokage to do his bidding. Fine, as long as they stay outside the barrier and don't interfere. Of course. Standing in the designated clearing, Natsumi and Kakashi warmed up and stretched for the impending event. As she braced herself, the red-headed Uzumaki could not help but experience an exhilarating rush of adrenaline mixed with anxiety and excitement. For a good spar, Kakashi was always the best. Even though they had to abide by certain regulations to ensure the safety of the spar, it was still expected to be a significant battle. Kurama's power could be used by Natsumi, but only in a way that wouldn't taint the area with tailed beast chakra. It was forbidden for them to cause each other serious harm. Even if they didn't currently have a mission planned, they still needed to be physically capable of going out on one within 3 days. Kakashi was not permitted to use the Sharingan excessively to the point of exhaustion and coma. Shikaku and the Hokage insisted on a few more rules and regulations, but Natsumi was unable to recall them all. It was essentially, fight clean, well, clean for a ninja. Fight fair. Fair for a ninja. And don't kill each other. I am unable to determine the winner. Sitting on the grass together, Sakura and Ino Wacheda are attempted to watch the two Junin engage in combat. They frequently couldn't even see the two fighters because they were moving so quickly. Additionally, they couldn't make sense of the bits they could see. In the middle of the flight, kunai were changing into red-headed ladies, dogs appeared out of nowhere, the Uzumaki lady had a tail and fox ears, a giant toad briefly smoked a pipe, and the silver-haired shinobi was so swift that she somehow kept turning the attacks of the red-haired ninja against her. The one occasion when the silver-haired's name was Kakashi, he only ever appeared slightly agitated when the Uzumaki changed into multiple nude Uzumakis. Overall, it was too much for the younger of the two girls. As Sakura watched the idiot's aunt and her partner spar, she had assumed the unplanned field trip would be dull, but it was actually both thrilling and terrifying. Sakura couldn't help but wish she had the strength and beauty of the female Uzumaki someday. In addition to being attractive, the woman was also strong and, when she fought, downright cunning. And throughout it all, she was grinning. Beauty was all well and good, but the redhead's movements made her impossible to avoid. Sakura suddenly dreamed of something greater than asking Sasuke out. Sasuke and all the other handsome boys in the shinobi nations would chase after her and try to get her to notice them because she would grow so strong and cool. Shanaru. Sasuke ignored the idiot's cheering, which was beginning to damage his ears, and watched the spar with rapt attention. These Jonin were excellent, nearly as good as. He would still kill them where they stood, but not as effectively. They might even cause him minor harm. He pondered where they trained, how they did it, and if it would bother them if he observed. He had a hard time keeping up with what was happening because they were moving so quickly. On one or two occasions, he was unable to see them at all and had to stealthily deduce their location by observing Iruka-sensei's eyes. Sasuke gave a frustrated click of his tongue. He kept getting slapped in the face by the idiot next to him because he was waving his arms so much. It was making it difficult for him to focus entirely on what was going on in front of him. It was true that the Dobi had a talented aunt. It was unfortunate that the witless wonder lacked all of the talent. At least he would have a suitable training partner if it were. Naruto could not even explain this to himself because it was so amazing. What a fantastic Natsumi. Obasan, she was kicking the shit out of her partner. Naruto honestly didn't know who was winning. He was unable to see exactly what was going on. There were loud bangs and numerous little puffs of smoke. Even though he was far away from them and there was a purple, shimmering wall in front of him, there was this one instance where his aunt was standing on a huge toad with the largest sword he had ever seen. The toad then spat out this brown, oily substance, and Natsumi. Obasan's spitfire, and it got really hot. It sounded like Natsumi. Obasan and her partner were fighting with kunai, but then the toad disappeared and there was smoke all over the place. He had no idea what was going on. Naruto sincerely hoped he could get closer, but Oji-san told him he couldn't pass the barrier after he was startled by the purple wall. And that was awesome. Although he was aware that the wall was composed of seals, he was clueless about how it operated. He could occasionally identify some of the symbols that were floating around on the wall, but they were all so much more complex than anything he had been studying that he decided to ignore it entirely because it made no sense to him. The fight was far more interesting, and he would read more about seals later. The fact that he could watch the spar made him very happy. The blonde had sneaked out of class because he was afraid the Iruka-sensei wouldn't let him leave. Although it wasn't too hard, the Hokage caught him. Naruto came up with the brilliant idea of a field trip just as Oji-san was taking him back to the academy and telling him that he should be studying in class. All that mattered was that he was able to watch the spar, even though he wasn't exactly expecting the old man to agree with him and then send a monkey to fetch the rest of his class. His aunt's awesomeness was now evident to all. Naruto was particularly pleased that his aunt's use of the Kyuubi's chakra appeared to be accepted by his classmates. He was blind to Iruka-sensei's facial color disappearing as he tensed up. By this point, the spar had lasted nearly 10 minutes. They had spent a lot of time hiding from one another, or at least doing things he couldn't see, Naruto thought. On one occasion, his aunt and her partner, Kakashi or something, decided to stop moving altogether. When he heard the word genjutsu, it seemed to him that the person was merely standing there staring. Additionally, the Kakashi guy didn't seem to be doing much. In any event, he didn't do as many cool things as his aunt. Naruto's attention was so focused on the battle in front of him that he failed to notice the Hokage's startled look or the ANBU's sudden tightening of their weapon handle. However, he did observe that Kakashi and his aunt paused their sparring to gaze at the sky. They both had blood on their clothing and scratches all over them. The expression of utter fear on his aunt's face was what Naruto truly didn't comprehend. The next thing he knew, his eyes were hurting from the intense brightness of the flash. He felt as though something had struck him hard in the chest, and he flew back, landing a few meters from his original location. He had ringing in his ears and everything appeared somewhat blurry. He was surrounded on the ground by his classmates as well. Someone grabbed him and Sasuke and fled the training field back toward Konoha before he could fully comprehend what was happening. Naruto could see that his aunt was gone. Kakashi was dead, and the purple barrier had vanished when he looked over his shoulder. What Natsumi was seeing more precisely, who she was seeing was unbelievable. It didn't matter that she was floating far above the forest, her large bubble slightly refracting the light, giving the scene an odd appearance. What mattered was that Utakata was seated across from her, his eyes bright and a soft smile on his lips. "It's nice to see you again, Naru-chan, you look nice." The brats were okay, at least. The only positive thing Jiraiya could think of was that it had been a complete catastrophe of a day. Naturally, things had gone well at first. He had prepared the area for the spar between Kakashi and Natsumi. The purpose of the barrier was to shield the onlookers from any potential misguided attacks. In that regard, it was unbreakable. If Natsumi had lost control for any reason, it could have repelled the Kyuubi's full wrath. The only issue was that he hadn't considered Biju attacks from the outside. In an attempt to smooth away some of the worry lines that the day was carving into his face, the sage rubbed his face with a weary hand. His passion was sealing. It was something he was skilled at and could always improve. Finishing seal training did not exist. There were countless things you could do with it, provided you knew how. A seal master's creativity and bravery are the only things holding them back. There were rules, of course, like everything else in life. These regulations were unchangeable and unalterable. If you didn't know what you were doing, you could also make a lot of deadly mistakes. The seal master was currently sitting beneath a tree near the training area where the battle had taken place just hours before, reflecting on all the issues that had arisen with the actual seal work. All of the chakra that was released during the spar was contained within the sizable cuboid space by the barrier. This feature was intentionally incorporated into the overall layout. The village and onlookers would suffer because Biju chakra was toxic. Additionally, they didn't want to inform every ninja in the village about what was happening. If the seal absorbed the latent chakra and used it to power or strengthen itself, that might be an improvement. Jiraiya wrote something down in his notebook for sealing. It was a smart idea, and he needed to remember to test something like that soon. The second issue was that, because he had not recognized the need, he had not built the barrier to withstand any significant external attacks. He hadn't considered it. As a result, the barrier collapsed and all of the internal chakra was released when an external attack occurred and was powerful enough. This would not have been a major problem if the attack had been typical and the individuals fighting inside the barrier were typical. One Jinchuriki, however, had been inside the barrier and had been flinging Kyuubi chakra around like an Obachan would tossing a single Ryu coin into a wishing well. Additionally, Kyuubi chakra had a strong bias toward the element of fire. Wind was the Jinchuriki's own chakra element. Kakashi's element was earth and lightning, while the idiot who attacked them had a very powerful element of water. All of these factors combined to create a spectacular mess when the Biju bomb struck the barrier. Although the bomb itself might not have been big enough to do much damage by itself, it ultimately produced a huge, extremely dangerous explosion. The village was still there, so the Hokage could count his blessings. The blast had been mostly contained at the last second by something. There was something very powerful, but Jiraiya didn't know what it was. The Hitaki brat would have been a tiny pile of ash if this had not shielded him as well. Jiraiya eventually put his sealing book back in his breast pocket. He was experiencing a great deal of anxiety, which was not a comfortable emotion for him. Nothing at all was going well. Silently, Naruto sat with his head lowered and his eyes wide, trembling in his chair. He was shocked by what had transpired. That morning he had been so joyful. Once more, he had insulted his aunt's cooking because it was burned. As usual, they had yelled and joked at one another while she walked him to school. Later tonight, they were to train. However, that was not going to occur. There was no Natsumi. Obachan. She had been taken. Even when she was using the chakra of the Kyuubi, someone had been stronger than her. Someone was stronger than her, even though he hadn't imagined anyone could be. Everything had happened so quickly that he and his classmates were back in their regular classroom with 2 Anbu guards inside and 2 outside before he even realized what was going on. "Oi, brat." Naruto fell off the back of his chair after sitting up so quickly. The loud crash made the entire class jump a little, but nobody laughed. "Who's there?" Iruka looked up from his marking, a kunai ready beneath his desk, startled. When he saw that there was nothing attacking the class, he exhaled with relief. However, a frown played at the corners of his mouth when he saw the expression on his student's face. Naruto, what are you doing? Iruka, sensei, did you say something just now? No, everyone is supposed to be reading quietly, Naruto. The silence was deafening. But, I can hear someone laughing. No, it was nearly oppressive. After a moment, the scarred teacher looked Naruto in the eyes and tried to soothe him with a calming voice, saying, "No one is laughing, Naruto. Are you sure you are okay? You have had a big shaka. Perhaps I should take you to the hospital." A butter knife could have been used to cut the atmosphere as Naruto frantically glanced around the room. The tense silence broke after a second. Kiba's abrupt outburst caused the entire class to jump a little. "Baka, if I can't hear anything, then there is no way you can hear something." Akamaru appeared somewhat irritated with his partner as well. Naruto, however, was appreciative. The silence that was bearing down on him from every direction was broken by it. As he picked up his chair, the blonde muttered something under his breath. He was truly going crazy. When Natsumi Obasan hears this, she would burst out laughing. "This is too funny. I should have done this ages ago." Naruto stood motionless like a statue, all the blood dripping from his face, as though something had taken his breath. A block of ice seemed to be sliding down his back. The chair fell out of his grasp and hit the floor once more. Naruto began to perspire as though he had just finished a marathon. Abruptly, he recognized the person speaking to him. "Naruto?" Naruto didn't notice Iruka's worried expression as he approached his blonde pupil. He had his eyes on the floor. "Kyuubi," he said in such a low voice that only the Dominican puppy, who had just begun to learn to speak, could hear him. Suddenly, the ominous chuckle in his mind burst into laughter. "You should see your face, brat." Naruto's eyes were suddenly filled with the smell of wet fur and dark water shimmering in dim light instead of the slightly worn wooden floor panels he had been staring at. The poor 10-year-old boy slowly lifted his head to gaze at the beast before him. It was enormous. It was most likely as tall as the actual Hokage mountain. Its fur was bright red, orange. Its teeth were as sharp as buildings, and its lips stretched into a threatening smile. With a splash, Naruto fell into the water after his knees failed him. His legs felt like soggy ramen noodles, and his body was like lead. Kyuubi, the large fox gave him a chuckle. The orange face loomed closer, saying, "Nice to meet you, mini brat." Naruto most likely would have passed out there if he hadn't already sat down. He swallowed and did his best to be brave. The blonde fervently hoped that the demon heard his voice more forcefully than he did. What's going on? Where am I?" he asked. The known destroyer of Konoha shrugged before turning back to Naruto. "Calm your tits, brat, you're fine." "Oh wait, I can't say that to you, can I?" Kyuubi said, pulling his head back and chewing calmly on a nail while he looked thoughtfully into the corner of his cell. "I'll think of something. But anyway, you are here because I called you here." Naruto made every effort to relax. He was informed by Natsumi Obasan that the Kyuubi was cool. That unless he truly enraged him, he wouldn't eat him. That they were friends, but it was difficult to remain composed when confronted by a mountain-sized fox. His voice sounded a little stronger than before, which pleased Naruto. "Buddha, why?" he asked. "I need to speak with your old and wrinkled monkey of a leader. Go find him." "You want to talk to who?" The fox rolled his eyes in frustration and ran his claws down his furry face, saying, "The Hokage, you idiot. Kami, I forgot how stupid you used to be." "Hey." Naruto was a moment unaware that he was on his feet. "Hey, do you want help, Natsumi, or not? You know where Bakken is?" The fox seemed to be asking for patience as he gazed at his cage's dark ceiling. "Of course I do, you fool. I'm inside of her, aren't I?" "Where is She?" Naruto would later realize that there appeared to be a sudden change in the atmosphere as the Kyuubi finally lost all remaining patience. "Shut up, you insulent speck of useless cells. Now go get the Hokage before I skin you alive and suck the marrow from your bones." "Naruto, wake up." When Naruto opened his eyes, he saw Iruka looking anxious. The blonde leapt to his feet and ran frantically for the window without even stopping to orient himself. Hokage. Before he could even take a few steps, the collar caught him, and an owl-faced Anbu lifted him into the air. "Hokage. I need to see the Gigi now." "Naruto, what the hell is going on?" "KY. He talked to me." In an instant, Iruka was paler than Naruto. "You can talk to the K." His words were muffled by the owl's serene voice, "Uruka-sensei. I'll go with Naruto-kun to the hospital. It has been a tough day for him. Please excuse him from class for the remainder of the day." Both the assassin and the boy vanished in a puff of smoke. But what are they talking about? As Hiruzen gazed over the village from the roof of the Hokage building, smoking his pipe slowly and squinting at the sporadic flashes of light, high above the ground, the thought tormented him. The ninja responsible for all the chaos had already been identified. The 6. Tails Jinchuriki is Utakata, the Kirigakure Noob. Nin. I'm 20 years old now. Known to Natsumi as an ally and friend, Akatsuki later killed him. According to Natsumi's recollections, he was not supposed to be near Konoha at this time. He was thought to be hiding from his nation's hunter. Nin. The two of them were simply sitting quietly in that bubble, their fists lightly touching, as far as anyone could tell. I don't like this. All the old Hokage received was a sigh. This also annoyed Shikaku. Kakashi didn't seem to like it either, judging by the silence that radiated from the Junin a short distance away. Even before the gentle poof and falling leaves announced his arrival, one of the 3 ninjas on the roof turned to face the newcomer. I don't need the hospital, you masked bastard, I need the Hokage. The Anbu nodded to the Hokage and vanished back to his post, saying, Shut up brat, we're here. But I have to. Right now, Hiruzen had no time for children who were in a panic. Naruto-kun, I realize you are worried about your aunt, but now is not the time for you to be bothering the Anbu. Wah. Gigi. Hokage. Gigi sir, it's important. He needs to talk to you. The young boy was unstable on his feet and was hyperventilating. Not really seeing, but looking around. In front of them, he was on the verge of going into shock. Later, Hiruzen was going to speak with Owl. At the very least, the man would have clarified why he brought the child here rather than to the hospital. Now, Naruto was sitting on the ground, rocking back and forth and hugging his knees. His eyes were a little hazy, and his breaths came in short gasps. Kakashi slapped the blonde on the back of his head, and there was a loud smack. The blonde appeared to regain his composure a little before turning to face the slapper, prepared to react angrily, only to have all of the color gone from his face. Ga ghost. In a different scenario, Hiruzen would have laughed a little at Naruto's expression. The poor boy most likely just developed a full-blown phobia of ghosts. The elderly man approached where the blonde was trembling, knelt down in front of him, and gently shifted the child's head so that Naruto had to meet his eyes. Calm down Naruto, what are you trying to say? His blue eyes glowed with determination as his shaking subsided and his clarity returned. Kyuubi wants to talk to you. After a few minutes, the 3 experienced shinobi were seen closely observing a 10-year-old academy student who had a cup of hot chocolate in his tiny, delicate, unwounded hands. The poor boy was trembling and was deliberately avoiding eye contact with the silver-haired Junin standing to his left while taking deep breaths to calm himself. This was even after the Hokage clarified that Kakashi had only been knocked unconscious rather than killed. When someone was standing one moment and then suddenly not moving after an explosion, it was easy for him to assume the worst as a young child. More so if the individual had just been covered in blood from a strenuous sparring match. Kakashi, please go wait outside. Kakashi nodded and slipped out of the room, only to return a few seconds later when the Hokage gave him hand signals. The blonde Uzumaki was having a hard time concentrating because the boy was certain he was a ghost. He would therefore have to listen to the boy's words from the shadows. The gifted Junin already had the right to know more about what was happening. According to the Sarutobi, he would be informed of everything once this was resolved. The man was just too involved and helpful to be excluded. Okay Naruto, please tell us what the Kyuubi wants to say. After a moment of struggling to find the right words, the boy was able to construct a sentence. He says that Natsumi Obeken is fine, and that Seiken's fleshbag is an ally. So, you remember everything too? Not just me, Naru. All of the Jinchuriki do. Really, that's great, even B? And Gaara? Above Konoha, they were floating in peace. It appeared to be a pleasant place, but he had never been there before. He noticed some kids having fun in the park. It was pleasant and quiet. He had forgotten how old the young woman in front of him was. She appeared to be at least his age, if not older. Her hair had changed from blonde to red, but she liked the way it looked. Her cheeks were slightly sunken, her skin was paler than he had ever seen, and there were dark shadows beneath her eyes, but it was difficult to tell because of the bright smile she was wearing. He had hung the sun itself, and she was staring at him as though he were her favorite person in the world. Yes. I have heard that the Raikage's brother has been taking a more active role in the letting of Kami no Kuni. He and Yugito have been completely banned from leaving the village and apparently have a full Anbu guard 24/7 in. Her eyes were closed as she laughed, presumably imagining the big man's reaction. I bet Octo. Pops is not very happy about that. Probably not. As for the future Cage, he sends his regards and hopes that you could arrange a meeting soon, however. Really? Naruto interrupted him once more, leaping out of her skin with uncontrollable excitement. He didn't get upset and let her have her moment. She had always placed a high value on Gaara. He had heard that after the sand had infiltrated the leaf, they became close. During the war, only Naruto could form friendships. It made sense that she would be thrilled to learn that her friend had thought of her. Naruto, stop interrupting me. You are forgetting something important. What? Madara was a Jinchuriki too. In front of him, Uzumaki was silent, and Utakata sighed. He massaged his temples slowly before continuing. I came here so that I could share some of Seiken's chakra with you. I have been going around the nations trying to get everyone so that we can discuss what to do next. I haven't found everyone yet, but at least we can get started. Natsumi's eyes were wide but likely not seeing anything because she was still too stunned to do anything but stare at him. As he spoke, she had collapsed to her knees, displaying the exact image of defeat with her body motionless and her shoulders hunched. As you are the only one that has aged, I assume that you are the reason we can all remember in the first place. He didn't really expect her to react, but she didn't either. Damn him for his incapacity to break bad news to others. Utakata joined her on the floor of his reinforced bubble while muttering obscenities and extending his fist. Eventually, after a few moments, she slowly lifted her fist and pressed it against his. They both closed their eyes and entered their own mental realm.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.